Hello, darling.
Hi, Maggie.
How are you?
Good.
Happy New Year.
You too. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. You know, I like to get on early so I don't screw it up.
Yeah, I know. That's why I like to at least open it up. So if anybody wants to be on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, well, I'm going to watch Amy on Jeopardy.
Okay. Amy Schneider. Doing well.
Not supposed to see you on Wednesday nights.
You know, darn me. Everybody is shooting.
Hey, Eileen, was police and fire uploaded? I only saw the EIS.
Police and fire?
You said was there police and fire opinion or no on the application?
No, those came separately, just police, fire, engineer.
Oh, okay. And the EIS was loaded up on the website.
Yeah, because that's the applicants, yeah.
Okay, got it.
Mhm.
Craig, you doing double duty?
Yeah, Craig's one of us now.
Oh, boy.
Yep. So now I get to hang out with you, Eric, for another night.
Lucky you.
Yeah, I know. So great.
Oh, you'll get used to it.
Hmm.
Do you really ever get used to it?
They just become numb. That's pretty much.
Right.
Hopefully these don't go as long.
No, planning board doesn't typically go quite as long as,
No, historically they don't.
I don't know where everybody is. It's here.
I think they were all just watching Jeopardy.
Is that
Amy
it?
won. Amy won.
She's gone by a lot.
I had the final question too. How's that?
Did
By the
you?
way, Stevenson.
I muted it, so I didn't hear it.
Oh, where'd I put that?
Vaccinated and get boosted. The science indicates that vaccination reduces your chance of severe disease, and booster shots are particularly important. 2. Wear a high-quality mask, especially indoors. Masks like KN95s, KF94s, or N95s offer more protection.
Right, who's listening to Dr. Chasky?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, it's a public
He gets
service
to go off.
announcement.
Sorry, doctor. There. Mr. Buzak.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Mr. Buzak.
Happy New Year. Well,
Beautiful day in the neighborhood.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening, Jorge.
Hey, we're
Perfect.
Eileen, I just wanted to let you know my computer had locked me out, so I'm trying to get back into it. So I may log off my phone at some point and log in separately. So if I disappear, don't be surprised.
Now, Dan is not going to be here tonight. Is that correct?
That's correct. He's not able to attend.
Let's see. I'm waiting for David and Diane. There's Diane.
Eileen, do you mean David Morrow?
Yeah, is he?
He's not going to be attending. He had sent
Okay.
an email to the board at 7 p.m.
Okay, sorry. I don't know what happened.
That's everybody. Let me just, hi Diane.
Hi.
Martha, I made you the co-host of the meeting because Nicole can't be here tonight, and I just wanted to have somebody as the co-host in case I should go down on this end, so. You don't have to do anything, just have to be the co-host.
Okay, just don't go down, okay?
No, I think we're good. Hasn't happened, so, but you never know. First time for everything. I think that's everyone. Do you want me to start, Beth?
Can start when you're ready. I've just joined
Okay.
separately, so I will hang up on this device if you could pull me in with that one. Thank you.
Let's just wait for her. Yep, okay, there she is. Perfect. Just waiting for Sujatha. Need her to.
Eileen,
I'm here.
oh, Eileen,
Do you want to do the oaths first?
well, I was just gonna ask one question here.
Okay.
On the list of people that you gave me, Craig is not included on that list, and I believe he
Okay.
should be
I think
because
that was just, that was my mistake because I was just going like, I don't want to say real planning board members because you are real, but you're like, you know what I mean?
I know,
But
I
yeah,
I know,
it'll be
and
Craig
that's,
as well. It was so
that's fine, okay.
Craig, Sujatha, Gaston, Srini, and well, David's not here, but those
Right.
four.
Right, okay, I just wanted to get that straight.
Okay. Do you want to do that before I do roll or?
Well, why don't we have the chair call the meeting to order? And
We don't have a
then,
chair yet, and we have to do that.
oh, that's right, I'm sorry. Yes, let's do the oaths of office.
Okay.
So will the four of you that are here, Sujatha, Gaston, Srini, and Craig, you're all, I can see all of you, or each of you. Will each of you simultaneously, this is what we're going to do. You'll simultaneously raise your right hand. You will repeat after me. Right after I say aye, you go and insert your name so everybody will say their name. And then you repeat the balance after me. We'll get to the part in the oath where you have to set forth your term, your office, your precise office. So let me go through that so you can say the right thing. If you want to just jot this down when we get to that point. Sujatha, you will be a class 4 member. So that's what you say. Gaston, you will be a class 4 member. Srini, you will be a class 4 alternate number 1. And Craig, you will be a class 4 member. All right, so we have
Class
3.
two.
Pardon me?
I was told he was class 2. He's our class 2 member.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's right. I'm sorry. Class 2 member. My mistake. Okay.
Eileen, just really quickly, you had sent it to Diane and I as well. Are we supposed to be taking an oath or no?
Should they, Dave?
Well, they probably should because, you know, there's one's a statutory member, the mayor, but the mayor can also delegate to somebody else so we can swear her in, and you, Maggie, would indicate as mayor. And Diane, you would be the class 3 member, which is the township committee representative. All right, so it's going to be a cacophony of words when we get there, but that's all we'll all take. And then when we're done, I'm going to ask each of you sequentially, not simultaneously, to sign the oath. And I can't, if it were possible for me to actually see you sign, that would be helpful. But if not, I will see your arm move. I'll see something, but we're gonna have to do that individually, because then I have to actually attest to your signature, and I can't do that without actually seeing you sign. So I can't see all 5 people simultaneously. Okay, so with that, if each of you will raise your right hands and repeat after me. I, insert your name,
I, Craig
I,
Blake,
Maggie Miggins,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly
do solemnly
swear
swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey,
and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey,
and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
And
I will
and I will bear
true
true
faith
faith
and
and
allegiance
allegiance
to
to
the
the same,
and to the governments established in the United States
the government
and to the
established in the
government
United States
established in the United States
and in this state
and in this
and in the
state,
state,
under the authority of the people.
under the
under the
authority of the
authority
people.
of the people.
I do further solemnly swear
I do further solemnly swear
that I will faithfully, impartially, and justly perform
That I will
I will
faithfully,
faithfully,
impartially, and justly
impartially, and justly perform
all the duties of the office of,
all the duties of the office of.
state your classes or alternate or whatever right now, each of you.
Class 2 planning board.
Mayor,
Class 3 TC.
Class
rep.
4 alternate.
According to the best of my ability,
according to the best of my ability,
so help me God.
So
so
help me God.
help me God.
Congratulations, everyone. You can put your hands down, and why don't we start here with Sujatha, if you can sign your oath.
So I'm gonna walk to the printer and go get my printout.
Okay, why don't you do that? In the meantime, I'll go to Gaston. Gaston, if you can sign your oath.
Did we lose Srini?
No, he's there
Is
up
he
top.
here? Oh, there he
He's
is.
here.
Okay, you have your hand. Oh, yes, it's him. Okay.
Gaston, thank you. Srini,
Oh.
can you please sign your oath?
I got to do the same as Sujata. I wasn't. I need to
That's
take
fine.
a printout.
That's fine.
So
Go
let me
ahead.
do that and I'll come back.
You do that. Craig, do you have yours? Can you sign, please? Thank you, sir. Maggie, do you have yours?
And drop it off to Eileen tomorrow, maybe?
Okay, can you sign it, please? Or, okay, okay. That's your left hand, right?
I'm a lefty.
Okay, I just wanted to know, sometimes I get confused with these things. Diane,
You know, I'm gonna try to print it from my iPad. I could not print it from my phone, and so I'm gonna try to print it, and I'll do the same.
okay,
See if I can maybe print it on now.
is, let's see, we're waiting for Sujatha,
Sujatha.
we're waiting for Srini.
I'm back. I could not find my printout. Someone's took it off the printer that I'd sent it to, so
Get it.
I'm going to print it, sign it, and send it. Is that all right?
That's all right. I will take that. That's fine. And Eileen, Mark has joined us for the meeting.
Yes.
Now, we haven't commenced yet, but
Yep.
I'm gonna point that out. All right, so we're just waiting for Srini to return.
Okay. Hot off the press. I will
Diane's
send
got it, okay.
Yeah. Okay, and I'll drop it off at Town Hall tomorrow.
Very good. Thank you, Diane.
Thank you, Ed.
If you can't drop it over to the town hall tomorrow, you can just scan it and send it to them or fax it to them, because then Eileen will just scan them all and send them to me, and I'll sign my end of it and scan it and send it back to her. So whatever is convenient for you.
All right. So I leave the bottom empty, right? Sworn and subscribed by me. Leave that
That's
blank.
correct. The left side is empty. That's what I signed.
Okay. Very good.
Oh, and for those of you who may not have filled in your name there, because I don't know if you had a blank. Did you have the names filled in, Eileen, when you sent them out?
No, they were blank.
So you need to fill in the blank, top blank with your name, and then the blank there with the class that you are, alternate member or whatever. Just write that in there before you get it back to Eileen.
Eileen, was the Open Public Meetings Act read?
Not yet, no. I was gonna wait for Srini. I don't know if he stepped away to get his oath.
Sorry, guys, I'm having printer issues, so I'll sort it out in the next few minutes. I don't want to hold up the meeting just because of that. So if you feel it's appropriate, you can continue. And
That's fine. And you are sworn in. So I just want everyone to know the fact that you might not have signed anything doesn't mean you're not sworn in. So you will be able to legally participate in the meeting as soon as it commences, which it will do momentarily. So I'll pass it back to the board secretary.
Okay. In accordance with Section 5 of the Open Public Meetings Act, be advised that notice of this meeting was made by posting on the bulletin board in Town Hall and mailing to the officially designated newspapers a list of the meeting dates annually, indicating that this meeting would be taking place on Wednesday, January 5th, 2022, via Zoom webinar. Diane Aglo?
Here.
Gaston Halpert?
Here.
Jorge Mastropietro?
Here.
Mark Matzel?
Here.
Maggie Miggins?
Here.
Craig Kleitner?
Here.
Sujata Shan?
Here.
Srini Vijay?
here,
Beth Zoll?
Here.
All right. At this time, I will ask for a nomination for the position of chair of the board for 2022.
I would like to nominate Beth Zoll as chair for 2022.
Does anyone else have any nominations? Or would like to second? Hands.
Second.
Gaston Halpert?
Yes.
Jorge Mastropietro?
Yes.
Mark Matzel?
Yes.
Maggie Miggins?
Yes.
Craig Kleitner?
Yes.
Diane Thal-Eglo?
Yes.
Wait, I'm confused. Srini Vijay?
yes.
Sujata Shan?
Yes.
Congratulations. And I will now hand the gavel over to you.
Thank you. Thank you all for that. Our next order of business, and welcome to the new members. And I look forward to meeting more so those of you who I haven't met yet before. The next item on the agenda is the appointment of vice chair. And I would like to make a nomination for a vice chair person. It's the planning board member who is not in attendance tonight, Dan Bear. But I did, in consultation with our council, had a conversation with Dan and asked if he would be open to accepting a nomination, although he was not be in attendance to verbally be able to accept it, and that is permissible. Thus, I would like to nominate him to serve as the vice chair.
I
Would
will
anybody
second
second?
that.
Thanks.
Gaston Halbert,
Yes.
Or Eileen, do you want to see if anybody else? I don't know if anybody had any other nominations or not.
nominations?
Oh, no, I guess you would vote. I don't know. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut
I
you
probably
off.
should have asked before I took a second. I didn't know if there was anyone else who had a,
I don't know.
you would think by this point I have this. No more nominations? All right. Gaston Halbert,
Yes.
Jorge Mastro Pietro,
Yes.
Mark Matzel,
Yes.
Maggie Miggins,
Yes.
Craig Plaitner,
Yes.
Diane Thaleglo,
Yes,
Sujatha Shan. Beth Zoll,
Yes.
Srini Vijay.
Yes.
Great. Thank you. I'll be sure to let him know of his new appointment. The next item on our agenda is appointment of the planning board attorney. We have been, I would say, fortunate as a board to be served by such a good guy as well as professional attorney, and I put them in that order intentionally. Ed, we've been lucky to have you in our corner thus far, and I would love to nominate you as our attorney continuing to go forward for this next year.
Thank you.
Anybody
I'll
second?
I'll
Second.
second it.
Gaston Halbert,
Yes.
Jorge Mastro Pietro,
Yes.
Mark Matzel,
Yes.
Maggie Miggins,
Yes.
Craig Plaitner,
Yes.
Diane Thaleglo,
yes,
Sujatha Shan, Beth Zoll,
Yes.
Srini Vijay.
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Congratulations, Ed. You're stuck with
Thank
us
you very much.
again.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much. I look forward to it.
Thank you. Additionally, speaking with a winning combination, we have the appointment of our planning board secretary. Eileen, we literally could not do these meetings without you for many, many reasons, not the least of which you log us in. So I would love to nominate you to continue to be our board secretary.
Second.
Thanks.
Gaston Halbert,
Yes.
Jorge Mastro Pietro,
Yes.
Mark Matzel,
Yes.
Maggie Miggins,
Yep.
Craig Plaitner,
Yes.
Diane Thaleglo,
yes,
Sujatha Shan,
Yes.
Srini Vijay,
Yes.
Beth Zoll.
Yes. Congratulations, Eileen. The next item on our agenda is the resolution of approval of the 22-23 annual notice. It came as the 2 pages behind our agenda in the packet that was sent home. This includes meeting dates. Oh, great. And Eileen, this does reflect the first meeting in February, which will not be a planning board meeting on that first week in February due to the reorganization of the TC meeting is meeting on what would have been a planning board date due to the Chinese New Year right there. Great. Okay, so those dates should be as they stand on the printout that you have. So we need to do a roll call vote on that as well, or is that
We need a motion to approve the resolution, a second, and a roll call vote.
Great, thank you. Does anyone move to approve the 22-23 annual notice?
so moved.
Thanks, Diane. Mark, will you second? I see your hand is up.
Yeah, sometimes I do, but I'd like to include, if possible, because this was sort of discussed, the idea of a retreat just to answer a lot of unanswered questions. And we've got several new board members. And I know that from a couple of the, the township committee members who thought it would be very, very useful for them, it'd probably be a good idea. So is it possible to do a date or vote on it or something, or?
That is a great point. We haven't spoken to our planner, and I don't know if we have our board planners here tonight, but Graham is here. I'm not sure. It's a great point, Mark, and I know it is something that we had talked about in the 2021, towards the end of the year. We have not, as of today, scheduled it because we were waiting for our sort of our new government to be stood up, as it were. But maybe sometime in that February time, that because we only have one meeting that month, even if it's not on our typical Wednesday, perhaps if it's the following week or something, we could use that time for a board retreat of sorts. And again, due to the laws of, I don't know the name, I know it's unofficially called the Sunshine Law, it would have to be publicly announced. And so I think, Mark, that's why you brought it up at this time. Because it would have to be potentially open to the public as well if we were all together. And I think because we aren't ready to do it, we would still be able to schedule it if we made that declaration and noticed it in advance, right, with sufficient public notice.
That's correct. That's correct. You need to, if you're going to have an additional meeting anytime during the year, you need to provide 48 hours notice of that meeting. So, we can discuss this later tonight, or we can discuss it at another meeting and set a date when people are available. And then Eileen can do the notice requirements and we'll be fine.
Great. So Mark, with respect to your request, I appreciate it. And I think we should, use this as the springboard to get that on the calendar, but I don't know that we would include it yet because we don't have an agreed upon.
I could
date.
say, well, our next meeting is January
19th.
And we don't have any applicants scheduled for the 19th. The one that we did couldn't make it, so we pushed them off. So we do have a scheduled meeting. I don't have any applications scheduled. We could potentially use that as our as our meeting, if that's acceptable to everyone.
Wonderful. I think it's a great idea since we already have the date held. So yeah. Great. Thank you for that. So we'll sort of continue, and maybe it becomes a two-part event and we can use that date and another hour or something at another time. Thank you. Okay. So that said, let's move forward with approving this, but not lose sight of needing to identify times for sort of a board training at large.
Did I get a second on, I know Diane motion. Did I get a second on the?
Second.
Thank you, Maggie.
My pleasure.
Gaston Halpert,
Yes.
Jorge Mastropietro,
Yes.
Mark Matzel,
Yes.
Maggie Miggins,
Yes.
Greg Pleitner,
Yes.
Diane Thal-Eglo,
Yes.
Sujatha Shan,
Yes.
Srini Vijay,
Yes.
that's all.
Yes.
Perfect.
Wonderful. Thank you for approving the resolution. Regarding minutes from December 1 and 15, we do not have them tonight, so we will address them potentially at the upcoming meeting on the 19th. So that said, we'll move directly into our application, which is 21007. It's for preliminary and final site plan approval at Essex 28 or 378 380 Millburn Ave, the Essex 281 LLC. You can bring in, thank you, Mr. Cercello. And just a reminder, if you're not speaking, we can try to mute ourselves just to avoid feedback. And I will try to do the same when I'm not speaking. Mr. Cercello, if you're with us, you should be able to turn your camera on and your video, and you can let us know who we should bring on into the panel. We can see you, we can't hear you.
How about now?
That's even better.
Thank you very much. I would like to have Nancy Dougherty, Harold Moltz, and Richard Keller.
Great. And Eileen, if now's a good opportunity to bring Graham in with us as well, our planner. Good evening and Happy New Year, everybody.
You too. Thank you.
So I think we're all here. Yep. Thank you for waiting for all of us. You are welcome to begin, and then we can start swearing in your witnesses when it's the appropriate time.
Thank you. My name is Anthony Sorsillo. I'm with the law firm of Levitt and Sorsillo in Millburn. On behalf of Essex 281 LLC, this application involves two adjacent properties at 378 Millburn Avenue and 380 Millburn Avenue. Both lots are in the Central Business B4 zoning district. The two lots were fully developed. Lot 6 had a 2.5-story building with a retail user and an apartment on the upper level. Lot 7 had a 1.5-story building with a retail / office user and a storage user. The two lots had no lawful on-site parking spaces. If the board approves this application, the two lots will become consolidated into one, and the applicant will construct a new 3-story building containing retail on the ground floor, offices on the second floor, and apartments on the third floor. The lot will have 10 on-site parking spaces with 6 electric vehicle charging stations. The applicant no longer proposes a building directory sign that is over 5 feet tall. The applicant will comply with the maximum height of 2 feet. Our engineer planner, Mr. Richard Keller, will provide testimony on that. The height of the new building will be no greater than 40 feet. Mr. Keller will also give testimony on that. We seek from this board preliminary and final major site plan approval. We do require 2 variances. One for parking for 32 spaces and a sign variance that is proposed above the second floor line. We have 3 waivers, 2 design waivers for the loading space regarding the vertical clearance and the size of the loading space. And the last waiver deals with the ADA accessible space for its length. We have all of your township professional reports. Our experts will give testimony about that. I filed my proof of service, proof of publication with Ms. Davitt. And as I mentioned, I have 3 witnesses. If there are no questions of me, I'd like to call my first witness, Ms. Nancy Dougherty.
Thank you. I have no questions of you, but before we jump into the witnesses, if you'd allow me a moment to talk about process for the benefit of attendees who may or may not have been at one of our planning board virtual format meetings before. Sorry to interrupt, but hopefully it will benefit us all. So the way it will work going forward, I know there are a number of members of the public. Perhaps you have a comment or question. In our planning board setting, Mr. Sorsillo will be calling up each individual witness. That witness will be sworn in, provide a testimony, at which time, at the end of that witness's testimony, the planning board members can ask questions that they may have based on the testimony that person provided. If they can answer, they will. If not, they may defer to another witness. At the completion of planning board questions, we open it up to questions of the public. Members of the public can use the raise hand function, which you should be able to see either if you're joining via phone or on your computer on Zoom. And if you don't know how to do that now, you can use this time to Google how to do it. And you can ask your question. You'll come in, you'll be invited into the panel. You can ask your questions, off mute and introduce yourself. And then we'll have you come back to attendee mode. This opportunity will be afforded to members of the public after every witness. And then at the end, should anybody have any comments, that not necessarily a question directed at somebody, but just wanting to provide comments, there will be a brief comment period before the planning board votes, during which time somebody could make comments. So that's the format, just so everybody has the quick overview. And thank you, Mr. Cercillo, for allowing me to interrupt and continue with your first witness.
Madam Chair, before we do that, did we read the Open Public Meetings Act statement? I know you asked, and then we
Diane did. Eileen did. I'm sorry. Yes.
Did you read that, Eileen? I'm sorry. I was obviously not concentrating. I apologize. Thank you.
Yep, it's okay. Thanks for checking. I guess, Don, you have a question. Sorry, before we jump in.
Just very quickly to make sure I'm working with the correct paperwork. On the application that I have that I downloaded from the website, I think it's the right one, 378 Millburn Ave, right, and 380. The waivers that were listed, there's a waiver for an EIS that wasn't mentioned, and I don't see the other two.
We did submit an environmental impact statement. It should be part of your package.
Okay.
Right, I agree. It does say that on the cover letter, but they're subsequent. And then Gaston on attachment A, which is the kind of the darker text. Look on item number 10, page 3, which provides information, lists the waivers being sought, variances being sought. I'm sorry.
Okay.
But hopefully the testimony will answer your questions too. But
okay, that's perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Sorry, carry on. No, it's okay. Go ahead, proceed.
Ms. Nancy Dougherty.
Ms. Dougherty, can you please raise your right hand? Do you swear that any testimony you will give tonight will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You may put your hand down. Please state your name and business address for the record, spelling your last name.
Sure. My name is Nancy Dougherty. Business address is 511 Millburn Avenue. Last name is Dougherty, D-O-U-G-H-E-R-T-Y.
Thank you. Mr. Cercillo?
Ms. Dougherty, please give the board members the benefit of your academic and professional qualifications in the field of architecture.
Sure. I'm a licensed architect. I have an undergraduate degree in architecture and urban affairs from Barnard College, a master's in architecture from Columbia University. I've been practicing architecture as a licensed architect since 1995. I am a principal at Studio 1200 in Short Hills. We've been in Short Hills since 2009. And I am licensed in multiple states and have appeared before numerous boards in New Jersey, including Millburn on multiple occasions.
And is your license in active good standing?
Yes, it is.
Madam Chairwoman, I move that Ms. Dougherty be recognized as an expert witness in the field of architecture.
Thank you. We will hear her as an expert witness in the field of architecture.
Ms. Dougherty, tell us, what did you review, prepare for your testimony this evening?
Sure. So we have our drawings that were submitted, sheets A1 through, I believe, A8, with a submission date of November 4th, 2021. We will also be presenting 3 exhibits as we go that are photographs and a rendering of the project. We've also reviewed all of the professional letters that came from the planner and other the other letters that we received.
All right, tell the board what is proposed in this development application.
Sure. So the proposal is to be a sort of infill mixed-use building located at 378, 380 Millburn Avenue. As was mentioned, it will be no more than 40 feet high. It has 3 stories. On the first story will be 2 retail tenants. The second floor has 3 office spaces. And then the third floor has 3 2-bedroom plus den apartments. There is parking at the rear of the site, a total of 10 parking spaces. And those are the sort of highlights.
Is there any basement?
There is no basement. It is on grade.
And what type of vision did the applicant have for this building?
Sure. So originally, when our client came to us, they were looking to develop what they described as a timeless but modern mixed-use downtown building. And from the start, we took into consideration the goals of the downtown vision plan, including the uses, the architectural treatments, and scale. And so some of those things that we took into consideration were, as I said, treating the site as an infill development, but keeping with the town's planning goals by reinforcing the building frontage and keeping some on-site parking in the rear of the property. We wanted to reinforce the pedestrian scale of Millburn Avenue and respect the scale and rhythm of the current 2-story streetscape and the pedestrian experience that's created by that datum, while taking advantage of the permitted 3-story building height and relating to the older 3-story buildings in the town. We wanted a sort of vibrant mixed-use project that would bring more energy to this end of Millburn Avenue and encourage people to walk from this part of town to the other side of Main Street and vice versa. It was important to us to take into account the setback of the schoolhouse building, the Schoolhouse Plaza building, and also to maintain the existing driveway so that we weren't changing traffic patterns on Millburn Avenue.
Did COVID have any influence in this project?
It sure did. So I think we all learned lessons from COVID, and they've had a positive influence on this design. We know that people want smaller office spaces that are closer to home so they can work remotely. So you will see 3 smaller office spaces on the second floor. They would be perfect sort of closer to home offices for people living in Millburn and Short Hills. On the third floor, you'll see that the apartments were made larger than many units that are on the market at the moment. They're between 1,200 and 1,300 square feet. They are all 2-bedroom plus den units, so they den/offices, so they have sort of you can have a home office. And they each have private outdoor space. As we all know from COVID, getting some private outdoor space has become really important. So they each have either a terrace or a balcony.
Do you have any photographs of the street views on Millburn Avenue for the board?
Sure. If I can share screen, it should.
You can share screen, and as we bring in exhibits, we'll start numbering them. So just please pause once you bring one up and we can assign a number if that's okay.
Sure. Can everybody see the screen?
Yes.
We can. And so this will be A1. We will refer to this. Yeah, I know it says A9 in the lower corner, but for the purpose of our records tonight.
Okay.
And if you could just give it a description, that'd be
sure. So it is dated, it is our sheet A9. It's dated with today's date. It says planning board exhibit on it. And it's simply showing on the south side of Millburn Avenue. Everybody is intimately familiar with these buildings. So starting down on Main Street, and as you come down Millburn Avenue towards our site, just showing the sort of variety of buildings. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, sort of considering the 3-story buildings. As we all know, there are a lot of 2-story buildings also on Millburn Avenue. The schoolhouse building, which is directly to the east of our site, and then to the west of our site, Clemenza's, and then on the corner, the Verizon building. So just giving some context to our site, which is sort of located right here in the photograph in the middle of the page. I do also have the other side of the street, so we can enter this as Exhibit A2. It's our sheet A10, again with today's date on it, and identified as Planning Board Exhibit with street view. So this is the north side of Millburn Avenue, showing from starting with Starbucks, and as we come down the street closer to our site and all the way down to across from the municipal building, the parking lot there, and some of the other structures, and actually all the way down to the Wells Fargo building just in this image. So just again, showing context, looking at sort of the fenestration, the way windows are clustered in some of these older buildings, looking at the sort of cornice lines and the rhythm on the street between the 2-story and the 3-story buildings.
Were any sustainability methods utilized in this development?
Most definitely. So we definitely were concerned about sustainability as we go through the project. I can point out that we have my apologies. We have my notes just got mixed up, so I really apologize here. So
we can come back to it.
Yeah,
come back to it.
You know what? I mixed my I moved around my notes, so I'll come back to that one if you don't mind.
Sure. So tell us what's on the first floor. Do you have any plans for that?
Yep. So I'm going to pull up those plans now. So these are, I don't know if you want to mark these as.
Yes, we'll mark these A3. And this is sheet A1 of your architectural plans that were submitted to the board. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And can you just give us the date on that for the record?
Yes, I can. It's November 4th.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so just walking everybody through. Let me just get this out of the way here. So Millburn Avenue is at the bottom of the page here. As I described, the first floor has 2 retail spaces, one on the west side and one on the east side of the building. There is a covered driveway that brings you back through to the back of the site, which will be described by the civil engineer in more detail. Within the building itself, there are individual entrances to each of the retail units. If you're coming into the upper floors, you come down the sidewalk here, and there's a lobby here. The lobby space has mailboxes, an elevator, a package room, and then there's an exit stair that brings you down into this lobby. There is a secondary door that takes you out to the parking lot. Along the back of the building, there's some trash refuse rooms. There is a bike storage room. I know the planner had a question about how many bikes. We have a total of storage for 10 bicycles. Next to that is the meter room. And then all the way on the western side of the site is the second exit stair. The planner also had a question about the location of the doors relative to where the bollards are. And we plan to pull those doors back so that they are not extending beyond those bollards. One other thing to note here on the first floor is that on the western side of the first floor, we have an alcove where the meters will be located, so they won't be visible. They'll be well concealed on the side of the building. There is this 4-foot alley between our building and the property line, which is adjacent to the Clemenza site.
And did you describe how many square feet each retail unit store is?
Oh, sure. So each retail unit is about, one of us is about 1,400 square feet and one is approximately 1,200 square feet. And each one of them has, as I said, there's the front entrance into the retail space, and then they each have a secondary door to get out of the spaces.
Can you show us what's on the second floor?
Yes, I can. Okay, on the second floor, So on the second floor, we have 3 offices. They're approximately 1,300 square feet apiece. So as you come up on the second,
Ms. Dougherty, excuse me, let's mark this A4. This is the second floor plan. And I can't see a sheet number, but maybe if you slide up a little, there's a sheet.
Oh, sure.
number for you.
Yep. Oh, sorry. Hold on. So the sheet number is A2.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Dougherty. Please proceed.
Sure.
And that's also 11/4/21?
Yes, it is. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Uh-huh. So on the second floor, the office number 1 that you see on the left-hand side of the sheet, that is over the driveway. So that's the first office space, and then there's the second and third offices 2 and 3. There are 2 stairs that get you up to this office floor. There are some utility closets in the hallway, the elevator. There are common bathrooms on the second floor and a small janitor's closet. So that's the extent of the office space on the second floor.
Can you show us the third floor plan?
Yes.
And this will become A5?
Yes.
Okay. So sheet A3, again dated November 4th, exhibit A5. So on the third floor, we have, as I said, there's a total of 3 apartments. They range in size between 1,200 and 1,300 square feet. Starting on the east side, this first apartment, each of the apartments has, as I said, 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and a den/home office space. All of the kitchens have islands in them. They all have their own washer dryers, and each of them have some sort of outdoor space. So this first unit has a terrace here that's sort of carved into the building, facing east, and it also has a balcony that is accessible from the master bedroom and then also from the living dining space. The second unit in the middle of the building, again, 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and has a terrace space with a stucco stone parapet here. So mostly the outdoor space is concealed from the street. And then there's a third unit on this side, again, 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms with all of the same amenities. And then elevator and stair access to each of these units. It should be noted there is no access to the roof other than for maintenance. So there is no tenant access to the roof. It's not an occupied roof.
Do you have any other plans that you want to discuss with the board members?
I think at this point, I would like to enter the rendering, and I would like to go through, actually, we have a roof plan. So not the most exciting drawing in the world, but A4, which you want to enter as
A6.
A6. So this is a roof plan. So again, left-hand side of the page is the eastern part of the site. This notch here shows the opening for the terrace below. We have a total of 5 small units on the roof. So 3 of these are for the apartments and 2 of them are for the retail space. This is the roof hatch that will be used for servicing the equipment. And then there's 1 additional unit that is on the western side of this roof. All of it is enclosed with mechanical screening. I know the planner had a question about the finish of this screening. It will be a dark color, which is noted in small print on the schedule. So it will be the same color as the upper portion of the building. The roof will be, to answer some of those sustainability questions, the roof will be a reflective TPO material, which is sort of recommended for sustainability. And there also is an elevator overrun, which is what this rectangle is right here. So as was mentioned, the top of the building is at 40 feet. The screening and the elevator overrun are 5 feet above the roof level.
Do you have any other plans? I know you mentioned the rendering, but any other plans that you want?
I do not have any other plans. That is the end of the plans.
What about the rendering?
Yes, so let me bring up the rendering. Whoop. So this needs to be entered as an exhibit.
Yes, and we'll mark this A7. Is this sheet A11?
Yes,
Okay, and is it also dated 11/4?
no, so this is dated with today's date.
Okay.
So 1/5 on this rendering.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so I thought, I'm just going to zoom in here a bit. I thought it might be helpful to go through, oh, sorry, takes a little time to regenerate. I thought it might be helpful to go through some of the materials and the lighting and the signage in this perspective, and then I can follow up with the elevations with specific questions. Two things I wanted to note before we jump into the rendering. The plantings that are shown here were shown as much lower than they are in reality, and that was just so that people could see where the parking is behind here. In reality, these bushes are much taller, so the parking in the back will be fully screened from this perspective. And the other important thing to note is there is a street tree out here, which definitely is not being removed. It was just taken out of the rendering just so that people could see the full front facade of the building. So those are sort of the logistics. So in terms of, I think it might be helpful to start with, we can start with the building materials. So the lower portion of this building, which you can see in this rendering, was very sort of purposely intended to align with sort of the existing streetscape. This front portion of the building is intended to be stucco panels and comes up, and as I said, creates the parapet where the rooftop terraces of two of the apartments are. This material wraps around all the way halfway underneath into the driveway and becomes what leads you into the entrance if you're going to the offices on the second floor or the apartments on the third floor. On the western side of the site, which we can see in the elevation but not in the rendering, these stucco panels wrap around 6 feet on the other side. I know there was a question from the planner about what you're going to see on the western elevation. On the west side, you will see the third floor, which is this darker material, and then you will see the 6 feet that wraps around to the side of on the western side of the building. Once you get past 6 feet on the western side of the building and you get to the back side of the building, it will just be stucco. So instead of stucco panels, it will be the same color, but it will just have a stucco finish. And I know, again, there was a question from the planner. It is cement stucco, and this gives you a visual of sort of the color and texture of it. The infill in between these stucco panels on the facade, there are AZAC panels with double hung windows with traditional lights in them at the top. On the first floor, we have the storefront for the 2 retail spaces. We've also added some planters in between the 2 retail spaces to add some more greenery to the pedestrian experience here. In terms of signage, and again, I can refer to the elevations, but just to orient people, there are a total of 3 signs on the front of the building. There's 1 at each retail space. So let me blow this up a bit. Sorry, it's a little slow. There we go. Okay. So there's a sign here for each of the retail spaces. Those signs are each 20 square feet. I know there was a question from the planner whether that was the whole sign or just the lettering, and it is the whole sign. So the letters are actually slightly smaller than what was indicated, but the total square footage of the signs are 20 square feet each. They are lighted with sort of slender sign lighting that's shown here above each of these signs. There's a third sign on the front facade of the building that is over here. That is the 35 square feet, and as was mentioned, we need a variance for this because it is technically within the second floor, so above the second floor line, and that was done because we wanted to maintain the 13 feet clear between the driveway and the bottom of the bottom of the overhang here. There was a sign that was shown here, but as was already mentioned, this sign will not be this size. We're not seeking a variance for this sign. So please, ignore that because it's not going to be that 5-foot plus high sign. As you can see here, so this is the stucco, cement stucco on the forward part of the building. We stepped the building back again to sort of relate to the scale and the setback of the schoolhouse building. The portion that is set back will be AZAC panels that wrap up here and across the front. As we move around the building, we will have AZAC siding material, and then underneath the upper balcony and as a feature element as you walk into the lobby space and also in this upper floor terrace, there will be a wood paneling as an accent element. In terms of the lighting on the first floor, we have architectural lighting that is intended to just wash the front of the building. So there's 4 sconces that are shown here that are just wall washers that will graze the face of the building. And then up on the upper level in the apartments up here, we have additional sconces, but they just have downlight. So they're not throwing light up at all. They're just very focused down on the face of the building here. I think those are the highlights for the rendering. As was described, the building is 40 feet above the average grade. So it meets the height requirement. I think those are the highlights for the rendering.
You had mentioned wanting to show the elevation sheet.
Yep. So I'm going to go back to the architectural drawings and go to the next sheet. So let me just get there. So this is our drawing sheet A5.
And this becomes A8 in evidence.
That is correct.
Great. So this just shows what we just saw in the rendering. So this is the north facade of the building facing Millburn Avenue. As you can see, the 2 retail tenants. So this one that's on the western face of the front facade with a nice storefront. It's approximately 15 feet floor to floor. So nice ceiling height in those first floor retail spaces. Signage above each entrance. They each have a 6-foot pair of entry doors. And then an expanse of storefront in between them. Up on the second floor, so all of these double hung windows, this is the cement stucco portion of the building. These are all the double hung windows that would be in the 3 office spaces on the second floor, as well as these windows in this setback. And then as we go up to the 3rd floor, this is one of the apartments. The second apartment is here, and then the 3rd apartment goes along in this area. This is the driveway. So as I mentioned, there's 13 feet from the driveway to the underside of the overhang. We do have sort of security gates here that the civil engineer will talk about when he gets to his testimony. And as I mentioned before, the building height to the top of the building is under the 40 feet permitted. Let me just scroll down here. So on the side of the building, so this is the eastern elevation. So if you're looking from the schoolhouse building, I'll start on, this is the Millburn Avenue side. So the portion in the background shows the stucco panels. And then this is what you see along the eastern facade. So a combination of panels and then siding. This is the recessed balcony up on the apartment on the 3rd floor. On the 1st floor, as you come down this sidewalk, this is the secondary entrance from one of the retail spaces. And then we have the wood accent paneling here on the outside of the building. And then this is the entrance into the lobby. And then as you can see, once you get past the lobby, it turns to just a regular stucco finish. There are bollards that protect the sidewalk, and these are the bollards in the back of the building. There is an overhang which will refer to in more detail on the rear elevation. So I'm going to go to the next sheet. This sheet is sheet A7. Oh, I apologize. I'm
Mark
sorry.
that A9.
I'm sorry. Here, this is A6. My apologies. It skipped one. Right. This is A6.
Mark that A9.
Yep. Okay, so starting on the south elevation, so this is the elevation from the parking lot. So a couple of things to mention. I know so at the bottom here, we have, this is a stucco finish. So that stucco finish wraps around from the back side of underneath the overhang, comes around the back of the building, and then it wraps around to the west side of the building. Starting on the west side of the building, we do have a gate here, just so people aren't sort of coming down that alley. So there's a gate here. I know there was a question about the doors on the back of the building. Starting on the left-hand side, this is the door coming out of the exit stair. This door we're going to set back into the building so it doesn't extend beyond the bollards. The next door is the mechanical room door. We don't expect that door to be open very often. The next door, and let me just get to the plan so I tell you correctly. The next door is the bike storage. So this one right here is bike storage. To the right of that is I'm sorry, this one is the meter room, then the bike storage, and then we have the pair of for the refuse, the two sets of double doors. And then finally, this one is the back exit out of the lobby, which will be a glass door, a much more sort of decorative door. There is emergency lighting at each of these doors. And in addition, there were two fixtures. These are the parking lot fixtures. And the planner had suggested that they move down below this overhang, and we agree with that. And the civil engineer will provide additional testimony, but we're going to propose to relocate them to 12 feet above the paving here. Second floor, these are office space windows here, and then in the hallway. And on the third floor, these are hallway windows, and then this is in one of the apartments. And on this elevation, you can see the elevator overrun with stucco, and then this dotted line shows the extent of the screening. And again, it's 5 feet above the roof. Down, and then finally, the western elevation. So this is the one that faces Clemenza's. And so starting on Millburn Avenue, which is out here, we have the cement stucco panels. And then here we have some double hung windows in that office space. This is shown, we purposely, there's this meter alcove that's here so we can tuck the meters out of the way. And then up on the top floor, these are windows in that one of those top floor apartments. And then with the siding that wraps around the back and this overhang that sort of wraps around the back of the property. And then out here on the right-hand side, you see bollards, and then the parking lot is out here with the rear property line, excuse me, shown on the right. So that's A6. A7, R7, which you want to make exhibit A10. A10, right. So this drawing just shows a diagrammatic section. At the top drawing is just showing diagrammatically the arrangement of the spaces. So retail on the first floor, offices on the second floor, and apartments on the third floor. This is the drive-through on the right-hand side here. This is the eastern side of the site and the western side over here. The lower diagram is showing this is Millburn Avenue on the left-hand side and the parking lot on the right-hand side. So a combination of retail, office, and apartment. This shows you for the apartment where the terrace is. And then there's just the stair and the circulation at the back of the building. There's a little bit more of technical information here, one relating to the windows. So the windows are proposed to have the sort of high quality insulated windows with a higher STC rating than is typically required. And then it's also just showing some of the details for the partitioning. And then finally, the last drawing in our set, which is drawing A8. So it would be exhibit A11, I think.
Correct.
So this just shows we have a schedule of materials, a combination of the cement stucco panels, which I described on the front facing part of the building in sort of also this color, so a light color, and then the AZAC panels that would form the setback area on the second and third floors would have a look like this in this color and sort of finish. Some wood paneling detail, that's the places where I showed that underneath the overhang. The screening at the roof would be perforated screening similar to this and would have this, again, this dark finish to it. And then the windows, just an image of the double hung windows and what the steel bollards look like on the driveway side. And then over on the right-hand side, this shows the 3 signs. So the 35 square foot sign that needs a variance for height, and then the 2 additional signs at the retail spaces. This one on the right, that's sign number 4, we're withdrawing and are not requesting a variance for that one. And then finally up above, just an image of the bike storage for the bike room. And I think that covers it.
You have anything else to add, Ms. Dougherty?
I don't think so. I mean, I guess no, I don't think I do.
All right, Madam Chair, I have no further questions of this witness for now.
Okay, thank you. I am going to look to the board first for questions, as is our pattern. And if everyone's able to just have your cameras on, just so I can see everybody, that's great. Mark, I see you have your hand raised. I'll go ahead and call on you for questions for Ms. Dougherty first.
And Ms. Dougherty, can you just unshare the screen? And if we need to share it again, when there's a question, you can just put it up. Thank you.
Go ahead, Mark. Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of questions. I applaud you for the bike room. Is there any plan to put a couple of bike racks there also? That would be sort of nice.
In addition to the bike room?
Yeah, for the public.
Right. I'm going to let the civil engineer take that one, just in terms of the site planning.
Okay, great. Just 2 really brief follow-ups. It looks as if from the diagrams that 60% of your parking will be EV chargeable. Is that correct?
Yes, it is chargeable. Again, I'm going to let the civil engineer talk to the specifics of that.
Okay, that's great. And then finally, because as Mr. Sorciello had mentioned related to sustainability, are there plans similar to the residences being constructed catty corner from where you are of seeking LEED certification?
So we are not seeking LEED certification. I will say that, and I know I didn't provide all of this information before. So the high efficiency units for the HVAC, that has been very sort of purposely thought about. As I mentioned, the roofing materials and the materials in general, better than required insulation, et cetera. But there's not a plan to be LEED certified.
Could you consider that?
I think the intention is to, provide the highest efficiency building possible without sort of going through the LEED process, the technicalities of that.
Okay, thank you. I'd appreciate it if you would at least consider it, because your return on investment of a LEED certified building is significant, as you probably know, and it's also good for the health of the building and the health of the community. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Aglow.
Hi, good evening. So you mentioned that there's existing 1 street tree. Millburn Avenue is definitely in need of a lot of street trees. Would you be able to find placement for a lot of trees to provide shade and beauty to that area?
I'm going to let the civil engineer take that one, just so he can talk about the site. So I'll let him, I don't want to answer on his behalf, but I think it's a point well taken.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Thanks, Diane. Craig, go ahead.
A quick question. Mr. Terry, your drawings on your first floor for your retail spaces do not show any bathrooms. Where's the bathrooms for those retail spaces?
Right, they would be within it's a great question. They would be within the retail spaces, and we're showing them as sort of white boxes from a landlord standpoint, but they would definitely have bathrooms. Each one would have its own bathroom.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Other questions from board members? Okay, I have a couple, so I'll ask them, and if others do as well. Graham, I'll go first, and then if you do, I'll call on you next. Cool, thanks. So you showed the lights. Thank you for showing sort of both the street level and the upper level.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering, I knew one of the questions that was asked was about timing of when they would be turned off. I don't know if you can
Sure.
testify to that or not.
I can. I thank you for asking that. I meant to include that. So the intention is that the lights on the front of the building, so that would be the sign lights and the facade lighting on the lower level would be dusk to dawn. So, you know, depending on the time of year, but they would go on at 6 o'clock and go off at 6 o'clock in the morning. So that's the intention for the ones on the front of the building. There are two downlights in the drive-through on the ceiling of that. Those lights would stay on 24/7 for security purposes. The lights at the back in the parking lot that I said we're going to go down to 12 feet, those lights will be on a setback. So they'll be at sort of full power up until 11 o'clock at night, and then they will go down. But they'll also be on motion sensor. So if somebody comes into the parking lot at night, they will go back on, but mostly they'll be at a low light level. So that's the intention for the strategy for the lighting.
Great, thanks. And then the uppermost ones outside of the apartments on the balconies?
Right, so those would be tied into the ones on the first floor. So they
Okay.
would be dusk to dawn.
Okay, great. I'll ask about the meter rooms, and this is just because I don't know the difference. You pointed to a meter room at the back, and then you referenced a couple times the meter at the side. And then also Martha, the engineer's comment was about recommending underground connection to the meter. So if I don't know if those are all three the same question or not, I defer to you.
No, that's great questions. So the room in the back is really a utility room. They're different kinds of meters. So the gas and electric meters that have to be outside to be serviced will be in that alcove. So the gas meter, anything that has to be read by the utility company, and then the balance of the equipment will be in that mechanical / utility room in the back. So, and then the third part that you asked was about underground utilities, and definitely the plan is from the pole into wherever the meters go, to the extent, you know, required or allowed, I should say, by the utility companies, it will go underground. So the electric service will go underground.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
There was also a recommendation of using a vertical clearance bar to note the height under the pass under.
Yes, and that will be included for sure.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then I guess my last question, I'd actually almost want to hand it over to Graham. So I'm glad you had a question. You had commented on the your recommendation that the board kind of hand, I think, if I'm interpreting it correctly, sort of use of the material, the stucco, to you to review, or I just want to make sure I understood what your comment was and if it's already addressed it or didn't. So if I could ask you to sort of clarify the question that you meant there.
Sure. Yeah, I think that the clarification that we just wanted to confirm was that it would be true use of true cement stucco panels and not an artificial ephes type of stucco material. So we just wanted confirmation of that. And the testimony did speak that it would be a true cement stucco finish. So I think that that's sufficient. But if there's any further material review, we're happy to assist in that process as a condition.
Okay, that's fine. And then did you have other additional questions? I saw you did have your hand raised.
Yes, I do. Just have two other questions, if I could just ask those two. The first one is just regarding the configuration of the easternmost unit on the upper floor with the proposed terrace location. The setback in the B4 zone is a 0-foot side yard setback to the building lot line. So should, in the future, a building be constructed on the adjacent lot that could, build in and box in that terrace. Was there any thought or configuration of that unit to locate that terrace in a more open position, which may not be obstructed in the future or create a condition of conflict?
I mean, I'm just gonna go back to the plan. So I think the intention, the terrace, that terrace is really, intended to be, I would say, it's not necessary for any sort of building code issues, right? It doesn't have windows onto a bedroom. It's just really some additional space. It also does have, it's open to the sky. So no matter what, it's going to have light coming down through it, even if it, if there were a building built next to it. So honestly, it was put there sort of very purposely because we didn't want to put bedrooms or something on that, facing that side. We don't think it will get covered up, but it certainly could, and it would not sort of change the life safety or constructability of the building.
Okay, thank you. And then my second question is just, was there any consideration or thought about providing any screening at the lowest level along the driveway side at the eastern facade wall? I know in the rendering you show that as an open area with just piers. Was there any thought to provide some screening or anything to limit visibility of the rear parking area from Millburn Avenue? Obviously, you have to provide a consideration for sight lines, so you wouldn't want to cover the whole thing, but any thought to some screening in that area for the driveway and the parking area to the rear?
Right. So the rendering shows, very low vegetation, but the vegetation right now will cover most of those columns there. So the screening actually already exists on the adjacent property.
Yeah, I guess the question is, that vegetation is actually located on the adjacent property, not the subject property here. So that's not your property. That's not the applicant's vegetation to protect. So just thinking about the long-term visible, impact. I think that the feeling of the team was that it was not important to put, or, it didn't make sense to put fencing there. I think it could be added at some point in the future if it became necessary. There is fencing in the back, so which the civil engineer will speak to, right? So once you get past the building and around the back, there is fencing, 6 foot. Yeah, fence. I was even just thinking, possibly like the louvered system or something like built in between the posts,
between the columns,
kind of an architectural detail to provide at least some level of screening. It was just a thought if you had thought about that or considered that, and I just wanted the board to think about that as an approach.
Okay, thanks for raising that. Other questions from board members for Ms. Doherty? Okay, seeing none, we'll turn to members of the public, everybody who's in attendee mode. If you had a question for Ms. Doherty, the architect, again, not comments, but just questions, now is the perfect time. And I see it looks like we have a couple hands going up. Thank you. So just give us a moment and Eileen will pull you over. And as you come in, Eric, what do you need for today? You just need the name and the spelling of their name and their address?
Name and address, right, and spelling.
Name and address. Okay, great. So welcome in. I haven't seen anybody come in yet. Okay, Jay Pasternak. So you can turn your camera on and you should be able to unmute and introduce yourself. Name and address, please.
Yes, hi, my name is Jean Pasternak, Pasternak, 342 Hobart Avenue. My question is, in the bedrooms, is there a proposed closet space, and could there be a closet added in the den?
The intention is not to add closets in the dens. All of the bedrooms do have closets. And there's no intention to put closets in the dens.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And is that your only question? Okay, great. She's good for tonight. Thank you. Any other questions for the architect? So you would use the raised hand if you have. I'll just give it a second. Okay, seeing none, I would invite you to continue, Mr. Cercillo.
Thank you. I call Mr. Harold Maltz, please.
He's here, so Eric, would you swear him in? Or Ed, whoever'd like
Well, that's
to.
why I'm sorry.
everybody hear me?
I preempted Eric because we typically don't have a reporter at our other meetings, and I just jumped in there. So Eric, if you want to resume your responsibility, I'll gladly pass the people to you.
I'll take over. Mr. Maltz, if you would just raise your right hand, please. Do you swear from the testimony you give in tonight's Zoom hearing to be the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
You would just state your name, spelling your name, and your affiliation, please.
Yes, it's Harold Maltz, M-A-L-T-Z. I'm a principal of the firm of Hamel Associates, that's H-A-M-A-L Associates, Inc., located at 19 Porter Road in West Orange, New Jersey.
Mr. Maltz, can you tell the board your academic and professional credentials in traffic engineering, including any work you may have done in Millburn Township and specifically in the Central Business B4 zoning district in Millburn?
Yes, I'm a licensed professional engineer by test in the state of New Jersey. I've been licensed for the past 48 years, quite a long time. I hold a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from the Newark College of Engineering, hold a Master of Science in Civil Engineering with a major in Transportation from the Newark College of Engineering. I also hold a Master of Science in Environmental Engineering from the New Jersey Institute of Technology. I've appeared more than 1,000 times, well over 1,000 times in front of boards. In fact, most of my work is representing municipal boards, planning boards, and boards of adjustment. As a traffic consultant, I also served as an adjunct for the for the Newark College of Engineering, where I not only taught a course in highway engineering on site, but also to employees of the New Jersey DOT at their main facility in Trenton, New Jersey. I've appeared in front of the Millburn Board of Adjustment many times. I've appeared in front of the Planning Board in Millburn many times. And in fact, I've worked for this board. Back in 2016, I did the traffic review for the Short Hills mixed use development on JFK Parkway, which is right next to Short Hills Mall. It's under construction right now. I think, and I also, just as a little background, I also am licensed in New York and the state of Pennsylvania, and my licenses are in good standing. In terms of work that I've done in this area, you have a parking survey report that was submitted dated December 22nd, 2021.
Before you continue, just for the record, I want to let you know we will accept you as a traffic engineer. That's your testimony, right?
Thank you very much.
Okay, great. And now I invite you to continue. Sorry for interruption.
Yes, I just want to point out that this wasn't my first walkthrough of this downtown area in terms of parking. I also did parking surveys and testified before the municipal board for the Children's Aquatic Center located on Taylor Street. In 2017, the surveys were done. That project is located directly behind us, the site. I also did the parking surveys of the downtown area, which included all along Millburn Avenue, overlap much of what I did in the report here for Flywheel Sports. Those surveys were done in 2011. And somewhat more removed on Taylor Street up near Maine, it was Nita Things, which has been vacant for quite a while. That went back to 2004, but I've had the two more recent ones. So this going out here again, the fourth time was like deja vu. So I'm certainly familiar with the area, and I live nearby for 44 years, so I've traveled through Millburn many, many times.
So,
Thank
Mr.
you,
Maltz,
Mr. Maltz. Okay.
so what have you reviewed, investigated, and prepared for your testimony this evening?
Yes, I submitted a traffic parking survey uh, dated December 22nd, 2021. Um, And I think the project has been described already, but more specifically related to parking, the ordinance has identified on sheet number 1 of the site plans that there are 32 parking spaces required by municipal ordinance, and this reflects the 3-space credit for providing 6 EV charging stations. Consequently, a parking variance of 22 spaces is required. I was retained to perform a parking occupancy survey of the municipal on and off-street public parking, both permit and non-permit, within a reasonable walking distance of this site, and to identify the adequacy of the parking areas to accommodate the site's parking variance, the 22 spaces. Starting to the report, the parking areas near the site that I identified for study related to the proposed building are Millburn Avenue from Douglas Street to Main Street, which is broken into 3 sections in the study. Municipal lot number 4, which is the Taylor Street lot, both the metered and permit areas. Municipal lot number 5, which is by the east side of the municipal building, and it's a metered area. Municipal lot number 6, which is on the west side of the municipal building, it's permit only. The one-way drive on the west side of the municipal municipal building between Essex and Millburn Avenue. Spring Street, the west side between Millburn Avenue and Taylor, and finally Spring Street, the east side between Millburn Avenue and Essex Street. Now, these parking area limits are identified on Exhibit 1, which was put into the report as page 3, the parking area location map. Also, hopefully was included for making it easier to reference. A single sheet of that exhibit was supposed to be inserted into the back of the report for removal. The parking areas are individually identified on table 1 of the report. It summarizes the 13 areas that I separately counted and identified. It's labeled A through M, and specifically identifying how many spaces, the time frame that metered parking is in effect, the permit parking is in effect, what hours they are, and such. Breaking it down and simplifying it, Monday to Friday in the entire survey area identified, there were 215 spaces. However, after 6 p.m., and that includes, by the way, permit and non-permit, after 6 p.m., there were 221 spaces, because 6 spaces in municipal lot 5 and directly in front of the municipal building by the entrance, after 6 o'clock, they are permitted for general use. The restriction to municipal parking only is eliminated. On Saturday, the total parking in the study area available is 224 spaces. And I would note that municipal lots number 4 and 6, they have permit only spaces at all times, 24 hours, and there are 57 permit spaces in those 2 lots combined. The non-permit spaces are mostly metered, and they're generally 2 to 3 hours in duration. They range from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday to Saturday, and there are no metered limits at any other time. Having identified the entire study area, I also identified on my subsequent tables that I'll be referencing in a moment what I call the localized parking area, where I summarized a section closer to the site, shorter walking distance. Essentially, it included all areas except what I identified along Millburn Avenue as section C and E, which extends from the area opposite Dunkin' Donuts east to Main Street. That was the furthest out, and I found, and I knew this from the past, those 2 sections tend to get very, very heavily used by the adjacent commercial parking. So even though I included it because of the linear nature to the site, access to the site, I also identified a localized area and excluded those 25 spaces to reflect a closer in area that the site could draw upon. Consequently, the Monday to Friday, when you remove those spaces on a localized basis, the Monday to Friday during the day would be 190 spaces, 196 after 6 p.m. And Saturday would be 199 spaces. And the 57 permit spaces are unaffected by going to the localized area. Now, in terms of the survey that was performed, it was conducted on Thursday, November 18th, 2021, from 7:30 in the morning to 1 p.m. and 3 to 6:30 p.m. And on Saturday, November 20th of 2021, from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. and 3 to 6:30 p.m. The surveys were conducted in 30-minute intervals to identify the number of occupied spaces in each survey section. At the time of the surveys, weather was clear and schools were in normal session. In fact, I would note on Thursday, the weather was excellent. In the afternoon, the temperature went up into the high 60s. It was a very, very good day. And I would note in the report, tables 2 and 4 summarize the parking occupancy data in each survey area and each time period for Thursday and Saturday studied. And it represents the exact summary transposed from my field data of what I found for each of those sections. Now, in terms of the parking survey results and analysis, on Thursday, this would include various times, in relation to table 2, which identifies the entire study area, the occupied number of spaces, how many spaces I identified. That's the transposition of the field data sheet. The peak occupancy on Thursday occurred at 1 p.m. with 107 spaces occupied. The lowest occupancy was at 7:30 in the morning when 32 spaces were occupied. And this is out of a total available of 215. The 32 in the morning is as I expected, because most of the commercial area, the stores and such, wouldn't be open at that time of drawing activity. In terms of the taking the converse or the other side of the coin, I've identified the occupied, but now I'm going to identify translating that to vacant spaces, because we show that we can accommodate the 22 space variance that we're requesting. For the entire area, the vacant spaces, the highest vacancy was at 7:30 in the morning as expected, with 183 spaces vacant. At 1 p.m., which is into lunchtime, it dropped to 108 spaces vacant, still far more than the 22 we need for a parking variance. And for the afternoon, early evening, from 3 to 6:30, it was in the range of 111 to 125 vacant spaces, still a large number. Now going to and this is all summarized on table 3. Going to the vacant spaces of what I call the localized area, which excludes Millburn Avenue east of Dunkin' Donuts. There were fewer available spaces, as I point out. The highest vacancy occurred at 7:30 in the morning with 165 spaces vacant. The lowest was at 108 at 1 p.m., although at between 3 and 6:30, the range was 106 to 120. So that's basically what you have in terms of vacancy in those study areas, local and entire. The one thing I would note finally for this Thursday period is that for the vacant permit only, this would relate to lots 4 and 6, which is noted as areas B and L on my exhibit. During the whole 9 hours studied this day, the range of vacant space permit spaces was between 27 and 44 spaces. The permit only exceeded the 22 spaces that we needed to satisfy the variance. And I would point out in summary, the areas with the most vacant parking were closest to the site being considered. Finally, the Saturday, I'm just going to run through the same. This is at the back end of the report, referring to table 4, which summarizes the entire study area and occupied spaces only. The peak occurred at 12:30 PM with 117 occupied. The lowest occupancy was at 4 PM with 78. The 3 to 6 PM period was in the range of 79 to 99, 3 to 6:30 PM, between 79 to 99. Once again, going to the reverse to identify vacancy, the other side of the coin for the entire study area. The highest vacancy occurred at the earliest time studied at 9 AM and had 151 spaces vacant. The lowest vacancy was rather flat, 12:30 to 1 at 107/108 spaces vacant. And once again, from 3 to 6:30, there were 125 to 146 spaces vacant in that time frame. All of these well exceeding the 22 needed for the parking variance. Finally, going to the localized area, excluding that area east of Dunkin' Donuts on Millburn Avenue, the vacant spaces in the localized area, the highest vacancy, as expected, occurred at 9 AM with 146 spaces. The lowest vacancy was at the 12:30 to 1 PM period at 105/106 spaces, rather flat for the hour. And then finally, in the afternoon, evening, or early evening, 3 to 6:30, it was 123 to 141 spaces. And then lastly, I just like to point out, for the vacant permit only, for the entire day that was surveyed, the vacancy in the permit spaces of those two lots totaled 38 to 47 spaces, well above the 22 that was needed for the variance. So that summarized, I tried to not overwhelm you with all the numbers on the tables and just highlighted the important ones. But in summary, based on the parking surveys and analyses performed, the 22 parking space variance required for the proposed mixed-use building site is more than adequately accommodated by the nearby vacant and off-street municipal parking in the broader entire survey area. Furthermore, the surveys of the localized parking areas had more than sufficient parking spaces to satisfy the 22 space parking variance, being in excess of 100 vacant spaces during all time periods. And additionally, the parking only permit parking in municipal lots 4 and 6 had more vacant spaces available at all time periods than the parking variance requires. And I would note that the calculation of the site's 32 space parking requirement did not reflect any reduction for use of nearby mass transit, the Millburn train station, which is located further over off of Lackawanna Plaza, going along Essex in that area on the other side of the track. So it's our professional opinion that the required 22 parking space variance can be granted, as the variance relief can be more than adequately accommodated by nearby available municipal parking. Now, that concludes what I had in my report and summarize the parking survey exhibits. I would like to add excuse me one second. I would like to add one other thing. As I mentioned, there is a train station here, and I took no credit for possible use of the train station. However, there is a publication, I've had this for some time. It's a New Jersey Transit publication entitled Planning for Transit-Friendly Land Use. And in it, it talks about the adjustment on parking. It has a station area parking reduction table schedule, which identifies for residential and office and non-residential, non-office reductions for various types of locations of mass transit facilities and trains. For the location of this site versus the where the train station is located, the approximate recommended reduction is about 15%. If you apply the 15% to the 32 spaces required for this site, that's a reduction of 5 spaces. Consequently, the 32 spaces required would be reduced by 5 to 27 spaces required. Subtracting the 10 spaces provided on site leaves you 17 spaces then required off site. So if you reflect the mass transit usage, that would reduce some pressure on requirements of off-site parking. And I would note that the New Jersey residential site improvement standards even allow you to adjust the standards, parking standards, based on consideration of nearby mass transit services. So that concludes what I have to say.
Madam Chair, I have no further questions of Mr. Maltz at this time.
I'm sorry if I overwhelmed you with all the numbers.
Can't hear you back.
I'm sorry, I can't hear anybody.
You may have to call in.
Eileen, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh,
Yeah, we
okay.
can hear you. Beth's having some trouble with her.
Okay, because everything went quiet.
We can't hear her. So we're just waiting on her.
Hi, can we try this?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, apologies. Thank you for bearing with me. Thank you, Mr. Maltz. I heard everything you said.
Okay.
I turn to the board for questions on Mr. Maltz's testimony. Srini, I see yours.
Yeah, thank you for your testimony, Mr. Maltz. You may or may not be aware there is a proposed 53-unit mixed-use development coming right across the street at 397 Millburn Avenue. So I'm curious, if you were to incorporate that development, which probably is going to come within the next year plus, how might that impact your traffic study, both in terms of vehicular traffic as well as pedestrian traffic?
Well, obviously, you're talking about a project that's way down the road. We're before you right now. I don't know what that project is going to have in terms of on-site parking. It may be fully conforming in terms of on-site parking, therefore it would reduce any pressure that you would have for demand on the street. In terms of our particular project, we don't need that much off-site parking, and there is substantial parking, particularly in this area, which would overlap with the site that you're talking about. So consequently, I think there would be sufficient parking, although I can't address a project I never reviewed. How many units did you say it was?
53.
53.
Thank you.
Okay. I had another one there.
Okay,
Yes.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
And just as it relates to the driveway and getting in and out of the driveway, I'm curious, what sort of steps are you taking just to sort of ensure pedestrian safety? Are there sort of blinkers or warning signs whenever a vehicle is coming in or getting out?
Well, I didn't do a site plan study. That's really the site engineer.
Site
I would
engineer,
tell
okay.
you essentially,
Mhm.
you have a right in, right out. And for a driver that, for example, that's coming right out, he's on the northbound side of the driveway. So he's removed from a half width of driveway from anybody approaching on the sidewalk coming from the west. So he can see to the left. Similarly, it's open in front of the building, the schoolhouse building to the right of us. And you can see people coming from the right. It's a rather wide sidewalk area, and it is somewhat open. Similarly, a right turn in, a driver would be able to see anybody walking on the sidewalk in that area.
Any additional questions, Srini? You're okay. Thanks. Craig, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Maltz, are you familiar with how the spots are going to be deeded in the rear of the building?
I've heard that they're going to designate, and I think Mr. Keller is going to have to speak more to this. I've only heard peripherally that they're talking about assigning 3 spaces for residential, and the balance of the spaces would be for the office. But
So-
Mr. Keller would have to really address that.
Okay, so you refer to these hundreds of spots here and there, but I mean, you have to agree that the bulk of the parking for this facility are lots 4 and 5 in terms of the 3-hour parking, correct?
No, lot number 4, the municipal lot is there's 2 sections. There's a permit only section, and then
Correct.
there's
The
a
business
a
permit as
meter
well.
section. Yeah, and then directly across the street from us, what I label as L, has business and 24-hour parking, which covers
Well,
residential.
that's lot 6.
That's
I'm
lot
actually,
6.
but if you're visiting
Lot
this
6 is the
building,
most convenient.
right, but lot 6, as you're visiting this building, you've passed lot 6 if you're in front of the building. So you have to drive back around town to get to 6. So my question is, if you're going to actually realistically park for this building, wouldn't 4 and 5 be a logical place to park?
No, I consider all 3. If somebody knew they were coming to this
6
building.
isn't eligible if you don't have a business permit or 24-hour permit.
Correct. Then,
So if you're
then-
visiting the building,
I
you most
I
likely don't
understand
have
what you're saying now. Yes, for permit only, that's lot 6. If you want to park for meter, then, and you don't want to park parallel on the street, you want to go to a lot, then that would be 4 and 5.
Okay, does a landlord plan on buying 24-hour / business permits for the tenants as part of their leases?
Mr. Keller would have to answer that.
Okay, well, I'll wait for Rich.
Okay, thank you. Diana, did I see your hand up earlier?
You know, my computer froze and I got rehooked on and I missed who are are there 10 parking spots? Are they for residents? And can regular cars park in the EV parking spot? You might have said that and I might have missed it.
I think we said that Mr. Keller is going to testify a bit more to it, but he characterized it as 3 of the spots were for residential units and the rest would be used otherwise by the building. I think we're going to get more testimony on that. Is that correct, Mr. Maltz?
Yes.
Okay.
Sure. Other questions for Mr. Maltz based on his testimony from the board? Okay, not seeing any. So we open it up to members of the public who may have a question on the parking and traffic study testimony that Mr. Maltz provided. Use the raise hand function and we can call you in if you have a question. Okey-doke. Going once, going twice. Okay. Looks like we have no questions at this time, so we allow you to continue with your witnesses.
Mr. Richard Keller.
Do you swear from the testimony you're about to give in tonight's hearing to be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Name and affiliation for the record.
Yes, my name is Richard Keller, Keller. I'm with Casey and Keller Civil Engineers, Land Surveyors, Planners, located here at 258 Main Street in Millburn Township.
Mr. Keller, can you tell the board your academic and professional credentials in the fields of engineering and planning?
Yes, certainly. I hold a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering with a concentration in water resources and environmental engineering. That is from the Rutgers University. I also hold a Master's of Science in Architecture with a concentration in urban design. It's an institution that I taught at both the undergraduate and graduate levels for approximately 11 years. I have been licensed as a professional engineer since 1989 and as a planner since 1990. I've appeared before approximately 111 boards throughout the state of New Jersey. I've appeared before both the Planning Board and Board of Adjustment in Millburn many times. I've also been I just stepped down because we're too busy. I've been the Planning Board and Board of Adjustment engineer for Long Hill Township for the last 3 years. And I've acted as the planner for the Borough of Caldwell on a number of occasions on commercial projects in the past as well. my licenses are still in good effect.
Madam Chair, I move that he be qualified as an expert in both engineering and planning.
Great, thank you. We will accept Mr. Keller as an expert in planning and engineering. This is civil engineering, is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. Okay, yep, proceed, thanks.
Nice to see you.
Keller.
I've been, my partner's been doing the planning boards lately, so you haven't gotten to see my face lately. Craig has, but not you guys. It's nice to be back.
Mr. Keller, what have you reviewed, investigated, and studied for your testimony tonight?
Well, let's see. I moved to town as professionally in 1978, and I moved in. I started living here in 1997. So I'm certainly familiar with the area and have been familiar with this area for a long time. I have reviewed the master plan. I've reviewed the downtown vision plan. I've reviewed the zoning ordinance. My firm did prepared the base survey and the site plan you see before you, working along with the project owner as well as the architect in developing the site plan you have before you. My firm also prepared the environmental impact statement, which I've reviewed. I've reviewed the architect's plans, and I've reviewed all the professional comments that were provided in advance of this hearing.
What approvals are required tonight?
We obviously need a preliminary and final site plan approval before this board. And with that, we will need variances for parking, the number of parking spaces. We'll also need a variance for the location of the sign, that building sign that's on the easterly portion of the building. We'll also need a number of waivers, which I'll get into in more detail. They primarily are concerned with some loading space requirements, both vertical and horizontal. I think that that's the basic summary. I think when I get to Mr. Peto's comments, there were a couple of other potential waivers, which I'll address as well.
Okay.
Can I just clarify something? And I apologize for interrupting, but I thought we heard testimony that there was no longer going to be, from Ms. Doherty, that the sign on the easterly side was not going to require a waiver, but maybe if I misheard that, please correct me.
We no longer need we don't need a variance for the size of the signage on the east facade, but we do still need the variance for the placement of the building name sign that goes over the entry drive, because it's up into the second floor spanway.
Thank you.
Just barely into the second floor. It's as low as we could get it, where we look architecturally correct, but it's still a variance. I guess probably the first thing I should do is just work through our plans, but I'm going to start quickly by sharing an exhibit, and I lost track. We're at A11? Well,
A12 would be the new exhibit.
Okay, and I will share screen.
Sounds good.
And I trust everyone can see this, my screen at this point.
Yes.
Okay. For the record, this is an aerial photo. It's taken from the imagery is from July 22nd, 2021, in the mid-morning. We try to choose times when there aren't too many shadows. It's taken from nearmap.com. It was prepared by my office on January 3rd, 2021. And we've superimposed both the site over that, as well as some of the information that was on Mr. Maltz's area map. So if I zoom in on A12 here for a second, you'll see that the property in question is right in the center. It's 378-380 Millburn Avenue. This drawing is oriented inverse from the site plans, because it's easier to show due north to the top. So you'll see Millburn Avenue is at the top of the PQ, which stands for property in question. And you'll see that it is located directly across from Town Hall, the new Town Hall Plaza, just slightly to the west of the municipal complex. You can stand in the parking lot, and you can see right into the engineering department across the street and wave. The property does consist of 2 tax lots, lots 6 and 7 in block 801. Lot 6 is the one on the east. That's about 587 feet to the west of Main Street, and lot 7 is about 162 feet from Spring Street, which is where the R7 zone intersects into the downtown, or the westerly reaches of the downtown central business district. Obviously, Millburn Avenue is one-way traffic to the east at this point, and Essex Street to the north of us makes the complete loop as being one-way currently traffic to the west, where it merges onto Douglas Street and then unifies with Millburn Avenue to become to go back to two-way traffic. Obviously, we know that that may or may not change at some point in the future. It really didn't affect any of the aspects of our design. The project is also about 1,700 feet from the Millburn train station, which is just up to the upper right-hand corner of the drawing. Municipal parking lot deck is up in that area, and there's the walk-up entrance into the train station off of Lackawanna Place. The municipal lot 1 is at the intersection. I did want to highlight, because I had a little trouble myself in seeing Harold's images, and so I did highlight, and I thought it was kind of important to highlight, while there are municipal lot 5 does extend all the way behind Flywheel up and behind the area where the courtyard is. The area that Mr. Malt studied actually was the spaces that were immediately off of the driveway in front of Town Hall. Lot 6 is is coded orange. That is the permit only space. It's lot number 6. It was area number L of Mr. Maltz's survey. I would point out municipal lot 19 actually is also a municipal business permit lot. While it's mostly used by the township employees, it is signed as permit no overnight parking. But we decided not to include that in the study, even though there were some openings, because we're not sure how the town's going to use that. There was some storage of trailers on the site. There was there are some municipal vehicles and police vehicles that are parked there. So while it is open for business permit parking, it has sort of functioned as a town lot. So we did not include that in our study. We really looked to keep the study proximate and localized to the western part of the business district. Mr. Maltz made the break at the Dunkin' Donuts. That's between section E and section F to the west. And I would point out in the downtown vision plan, the Dunkin' Donuts was also the break between what was considered the core downtown. And then as you move to the west of the Dunkin' Donuts, the north part became known as the West Shoulder. It's interesting because in the downtown vision plan, they didn't shade any of the other side. It was almost like, well, that area is already lost and beyond help, so we're not going to focus on that. But I think we actually advance a lot of the purposes of the vision plan with that. To the west of us, on the Wells Fargo site being developed by Beehive Properties, the long-term owners of that. That is the application that Srini was mentioning, that Mr. Vijay was mentioning, that there are 53 apartments have been approved on that. I would point out that project meets all of the parking requirements. So there was no parking variance associated with that project, to my recollection. I know they're coming in for a slight, for coming back to the board to look at that as a result of some ongoing litigation, but essentially it still meets the parking requirements. So one of the nice things, when you put together a zoning ordinance, it's always difficult to look at what you do with a dense, older downtown, suburban downtown central business district where you have a lot of small lots with no parking on them. And then you get areas on the periphery that can be aggregated or can be looked into large scale development. So when you're looking at large scale development, such as the Beehive property, it's much easier to comply with such things as size of loading spaces, the number of parking spaces, because you're starting from scratch out of whole cloth and you've got a couple of acres to deal with rather than a quarter of an acre that is land bound by already developed properties. So that's the basic area. The lot itself is 106.4 feet wide by 100 feet deep. So it's 10,640 square feet. It's 0.24 acres, as indicated a couple times. Immediately behind us is the SwimQuest Aquatic Center. That's the application I worked on with Mr. Maltz, where he did a localized study of the parking availability on Taylor Street. Schoolhouse Plaza, my firm also helped develop way back when. And that is also had the benefit of being a through lot where they had frontage on both Taylor and Millburn Avenue, and retained the old schoolhouse, built an adjunct onto that, but they have vehicular access egress onto Millburn Avenue immediately adjacent to our property. And they have another large parking lot that is accessed off of the municipal lot 4 and the drive that comes off of Millburn Avenue connecting Taylor Street. So different development. And I would point out that actually that development does have a loading space, but actually it doesn't meet the current requirements for a loading space. I would point out that most all of the downtown work we've done on small infill sites or existing sites, there are no loading spaces at all. There was a carve out behind the Dunkin' Donuts, behind the La Strada in that area, or the apartment building. There was a carve out in municipal lot 4 for truck for unloading. I have to say, I almost never see vehicles there. It drives me crazy when at 2 in the afternoon there's a vehicle parked here blocking traffic, and it's empty back in here. So we did feel it was important as part of our design to provide both on-site parking and and a loading space, but it was really not possible to meet some of those requirements, which I'll get to in a few minutes. I think, but we also did recognize that we were starting by removing 2 buildings, and we did have the ability to add some parking. We thought it was important to find that correct balance between being a proper street facing pedestrian reinforcing building that kind of hides the parking behind, gets enough parking but doesn't make it a sea of parking with a small postage stamp building, or even worse, having a lot of parking under the building. So that's the neighborhood that we're talking about. I thought it was important to show that the parking study really was localized into the immediate area. I would point out that each of these do act very differently. So for the permit space is an area B, which is lot 4, the westerly part of lot 4, as well as lot 6. They're very different than the permit parking that's associated with parking lots 1 and 2. This really does become that shoulder area where parking starts to open up, and there is parking available even without looking at municipal lot 19, which also allows business permits. So that's the surrounding uses and the surrounding area. I'm going to go to my cover sheet now on my drawing set, which was submitted as part of the application. So I guess this would be A13. It is my drawing number 1. All of these drawings should be dated 11/4/2021. The sheet at hand is the area map, and I will point out that the only thing I can really add that the photo didn't was that behind us, the entire block 801 is a commercial zone. It's in the B4 Central Business District. However, across the street is the R7 zone, and as you move to the west, the site is the R7 zone. So we are wholly located within the B4 Central Business District. I will come back to the parking requirements and the building and the zoning requirements after I go through the rest of the site inventory. With regard to the next sheet, this is the title and topographic survey. This is the detailed. I'm not used to my office using such a big scale. We have a new project manager that likes 10 scales. You can see that the property itself is 106.4 feet by 100 feet deep in aggregate. That's merging the 2 properties. The existing buildings that were on the site were certainly the one on the right at 380 was residential in character, as was the old Millburn Pet Shop immediately to the left of that. They were the Millburn Pet Shop. Both of these sites have had a number of uses over time. Obviously, the right portion and the primary portion of the building at 378 was the home of Millburn Pet Shop. It was the owner occupied pet retail food shop. Next to that was a number of uses over time, most recently a home goods store called Inside Home Goods. The back area has functioned as garages at times, and for a number of years, actually the garages, certainly this garage here, and I believe into the next two garage spaces, actually acted as Avenue Salvage Warehouse. So it was a salvage warehouse where you could buy antique elements that were salvaged from many old buildings, and there was a retail use in the back. There was also on the second floor where there was a 1,400 square foot 2-bedroom apartment on the second floor and up into the attic. The 380 Millburn Avenue site, that was a garden supply shop built in the building was built in 1940. Among its most recent uses was a garden supply shop, as well as Birch Hill Landscaping used the second floor. So Birch Hill kind of used the first floor to sell landscape and garden items, but they really used the second floor as their design space for their landscape architecture and install firm. Most recently, that was a firm called 380 Work, and that was a combination of retail and co-working space on the second floor. That was a total of 1,340 square feet of combined retail. The 378 had a combined amount of retail, about 4,134 square feet of retail. It's not on our sheet, but I would point out that if you're assessing the parking requirements for each of these two uses based upon the uses primarily as retail with second floor office or second floor apartments, the amount of parking required for the previous mix of uses, and many of them were never actually probably permitted or went through site plan approval, but the way they were used would have generated a parking requirement of between 22 and 26 spaces for the uses that we are replacing. So before we even got here, we analyzed that we need 32 spaces for our use, but the existing uses in their various configurations over years would have required between 22 and 26 spaces for those uses. Actually, I think Mr. Cersillo in his opening statement slightly misspoke in that there are no striped spaces on the parking lot on 378. You basically come in, there are 3 garage doors. Alternately, some or all of those were used as garages, but more often they were used as either storage for the salvage company or storage for the pet shop. But there's no striped areas. There is enough area to get between 5 and 7 cars out there, depending if you're using the garages or not. If you're not really looking at, you could never get a striping plan that would meet the township requirements in terms of, you'd probably have three cars and 2 garage spaces if you were to try to lay something out that met the design standards for the township. So there could have been between 5 and 7 cars possibly parked on that lot at any given time. So there was always a parking shortfall of between 15 and 24 cars on the existing site. Those buildings were in poor shape with asbestos, mold, compromising structural issues. The tree right here, tree number 16-inch tree, was actually growing out of the foundation and through the basement foundation walls of the building next to us. So they were in relatively poor condition. And while, when you squint your eyes, they had a nice patina on them, they certainly weren't the kind of buildings that we want in our downtown, or that the master plan or the vision plan really look to support downtown and elevate our downtown. So the applicant did receive a demo permit in late 2021 to raise the existers and clear the site. We actually captured that survey before then. COVID has made everything go slower, and we actually went through a number of iterations on fine tuning that building before we got to where we're at. So our survey does reflect the site in its entirety, but it has now been largely cleared with a demo permit in place. I go to the third sheet.
We have to mark this sheet, Mr. Keller, A14, and the next sheet that you're going to put up, which I assume is your sheet 3, will mark A15.
Yep. So sheet number 3 is A15. This is the layout and dimensioning plan. And you can see that essentially the building fronts right along the right of way of Millburn Avenue, which is anywhere from 10 to 18 feet from the curbway as it undulates past the site. Part of the Complete Streets project recently in the last 5 years, maybe more. This area was modified. The area to the east of the center line of the building was modified, so it is a bump out. All of the concrete sidewalk is in that patterning and vernacular language that was adopted for the Complete Streets. There is a tree well in the front with an existing tree in it. We're not touching that tree. We're actually trying to tread as lightly as we can on all that existing paving spaces, and we'll restore whatever we need to in a similar manner if the project is approved. But we're basically, the building does what a commercial building in the downtown is expected to do, in that it reinforces the street line with a pedestrian-friendly facade. There's 2 entrances into the building on either side, and there's a recessed area that will allow for planters. They were shown on the architect's rendering. So the area inside of between the 2 wings would actually be for to soften the streetscape with landscape planting. I would add, I'll jump ahead, and this is what happens when you go third. You start jumping ahead into comments other people made. I think Ms. Eglo and perhaps one of the board member was mentioning landscaping. We're happy to provide landscaping. We really, and trees on the street. We really can't provide anything to the west of the existing tree because we'll start to block sight lines, and that's where you've got the driveway coming out of the Schoolhouse Plaza and our 2-way drive coming into the back parking area. So there certainly is room for us to carve out and put another tree, snaking between the gas valves and cleanouts, et cetera, somewhere on the property. We'd be happy to work with the township forester. We don't want to be redeveloping a whole language and syntax and vocabulary for the streetscape, because I think that's part of the visioning plan, and it's part of the decision is what we do with the work that was started and runs up to the site for the Complete Streets. But we're certainly, we like trees. We'd certainly like to provide them, but we are being an urban building in a zone that permits 100% coverage. We are nestling that building up to the street line. The building does step back, and it's kind of missing a line here in the plot, but the building does step back 6 feet. So that primary, that wing with the offices and the retail sits proud of that. And then that other unit sits back 6 feet. So that's where you'll see the gray shading is the balcony, and beyond that is the facade where you'll then enter under the building. Basically, the disposition of the building is that the building occupies the right 3/4 of the site. We were very careful to use the existing driveway entrance into the building to access 2 lanes of travel into the rear of the parking lot, where we have 10 spaces that are designed in the back, and they do meet the township's requirements with regard to depth of stalls at 9 by 19 with 23 feet of backup. Actually the handicap space was over-designed in terms of its width because only 8 and 8 is required. However, our ordinance does require a 20-foot space, which has always seemed like an anomaly to me. You never see handicap spaces deeper than the other spaces in a town. When you go into a parking lot, they're always the same curb line. So the 18-foot depth is actually consistent with RSIS standards. It's consistent with 90% of the communities we work in. Our town is a 19, so we did provide 19, but I think because the parking was moving, we left it at 9 and 9. We actually plan on sizing that down to 8 and 8, which is RSIS standards, which will give us a little room to juggle these spaces in a manner hopefully consistent with some of the recommendations in Mr. Peto's letter. As indicated, by Nancy, there are bollards that are clear of the 23-foot backup area. It's a tight urban spot in the downtown, and it's not uncommon with what happens in the downtown. We started this project with a building that covered the complete site. Part of the parking was either underground or interior. We decided that was too much of a parking load. We couldn't support it with the local parking, and we wanted to allow more light into the back. And so we sized the building down. We essentially cut the building down to almost half and opened that up so we could get sky to the parking lot behind us. However, we do really When we slimmed it down, we really do need to keep that back line where it is. So to make sure that people don't back into the building, we did put bollards in there. I would point out that, as indicated by Mr. Maltz, the owner, who does own another business in town and has dealt with combining commercial and residential parking, really feels the best way to go for this is that for the 3 apartments, there would be 3 spaces assigned. So 1 space in the lease per unit would be assigned to the residential users. And then for the 3 office uses on the 2nd floor, each would get 2 spaces. So that would be a total of 6. That brings us up to a total of 9 would be accounted for. That leaves 1 additional space, which will probably be most of the time the handicap spot, but it is required and would stay there. As was indicated, there would be consistent with good practices, but also actually with state law, we are providing 60% of those spaces will have access to charging stations at the back of the property. And that does actually, by state statute, allows us to slightly reduce our parking requirements as well. I would point out the building footprint is 5,500 square feet. That's a little larger than Nancy showed on her drawings because we actually were including the balconies because they extend more than 4 feet off of, more than 2 feet off the building. We counted that as building area. And then of course we counted the full levels everywhere else. So the building footprint is 5,500 square feet. The ground floor retail is just under 2,600 at 2,598. The 2nd floor, which has those 3 tenant office spaces of roughly 1,300 square foot apiece, is at 3,947 square feet. And as indicated, we have the 3 relatively spacious residential apartments on the 3rd floor. As was indicated, the 2nd floor plate does extend over the 2-way access drive, which allows us to get into the back. If I go to sheet 4, and I'll come back and we'll talk about that loading space a little later. Maybe I'll get Nancy to put her drawing up again. But when I go to Mr. Peto's comments, we did want to show a loading space. It's shown at 11 by 45. It does do double duty in that it occupies the egress aisle. And I'll talk about a little more about how we think that's going to work when I go through Mr. Peto's review letter. But we realize it's not perfect, but it's actually many of the downtown buildings that have parking behind them have single width driveways for both 2-way access. What's unique about this is that it's really only going to happen. We anticipate that the amount of parking activity is going to be nominal. You've got residential property owners, residential tenants, excuse me, who may or may not be taking the train. They may be driving out. They'll generally be driving out early and coming back late if they do, or in the evening if they do. And you've got the office users, which we've allowed two per user would come in the lease. And by lease, they would be required that any additional employees would have to purchase employee parking permits to use the lots that Mr. Maltz indicated there is available space in. So we feel the 10 spaces will be very low intensity in terms of in and out. The public is not invited to use that area. The shop owners and the shop workers will not use that area. They'll use available employee parking in the area. So the only people who will be using that lot will have a knowledge of that lot. They'll be frequent users. They'll be aware of the dimensions. They'll be aware that occasionally in the afternoon or at some point you may have a loading van that is loading in an apartment. We only have 3 apartments. We're going to have a lot of turnover on apartments, but it is large enough to get a moving van in back there. It is not large enough to get a fire truck in there. A fire truck would never pull into under a building. They would never risk losing their apparatus. We'll have a fire department hookup in the front, and the fire department would fight any fire with their apparatus from the street, as is evidenced by the fact that the fire department took no exception to the plan. And opening into that area is tall enough to get an ambulance in there. So if they have to pull up to the residential lobby, they can pull in. There is enough area to actually turn around in this area. It's not a smooth turn, but there is enough area to make that turn. But it's also anticipated that most of the time, an ambulance would be rare. They'll pull in and they may back out. And we've seen it in the downtown as well, where one of the team members helps guide the ambulance back out of the site and off they go. I think Ms. Eglow has certainly ridden with the squad long enough and can certainly speak to their practices, but it is tall enough to get an emergency vehicle for ambulance in. With regard to it is also tall enough to get a standard garbage truck in. We anticipate that they would back down. Again, they can be scheduled to be private hauling. They will be scheduled to back down the driveway where they can then access the refuse areas. They would be the 70, 80 gallon containers on wheels. They wheel them over, be dumped into the vehicle. By that point, the back of the vehicle would be out from under that area of the building. So they have enough room to pull in and pull back out. And again, that can all happen off hours. So it certainly wouldn't happen. We either happen early in the morning or an hour when we don't expect much traffic out of the parking lot. Again, because there's no retail use of the parking lot, we think most of the use of that parking lot is going to be biased. When it's used, it's going to be biased to the morning rush hour and the evening rush hour. That pretty much discusses the circulation. I'll go to the next sheet, which should be A16. This is the grading utility plan. The site appears to be relatively flat.
Mr. Keller, this is sheet number 4.
Yes, this is number 4. Correct. The site appears to be relatively flat, but it actually breaks in 2 dimensions. It does break towards the street, and a portion of it does break to the back left towards the Schoolhouse Plaza property. We thought it was important that our drainage plan basically pick up all that water from our site and all the water from the roof and detain that in a manner that will be protective of our neighbors and not tax any of the existing stormwater infrastructure within the township. I would point out that this project, we did a full drainage report. I would point out that this project is less than an acre in disturbance. It's less than a quarter acre of new impervious, and therefore it's only about a 2,700 and almost 2,800 square foot increase in impervious. Nowhere near a quarter acre of new impervious or new regulated motor surface area driveways. And therefore, we're not under the elevated DEP standards of best management practices. However, we did elect to meet those standards. So while we weren't required to, and the Millburn standards are rigorous, but we were not required to meet those enhanced DEP standards, but we took it upon ourselves to do that. So we have a state-of-the-art detention system that does provide the 3 parameters required by the state for stormwater management, and that we're providing groundwater recharge, we're improving groundwater quality, and we are providing reductions in the peak 2, 10, and 100-year storm events. All of that water is collected on site in a trench drain or in roof leaders into large diameter underground perforated pipes set in sand and stone, and with an overflow structure that then meters that out at a slow rate into the existing town storm sewer system that is in the trench drains, comes across the trench drains out to an inlet just to our east in front of Schoolhouse Plaza. That water then goes across the street and then goes to the west and then ends up running down Spring Street all the way to the ShopRite at the intersection of Spring and Main Street. I thought it was important. Not only we're reducing the flows, but those flows had nothing to do with the downtown flooding. We're not in the flood zone within the community. There are no steep slopes on the property. There are no freshwater wetlands in the property. But we thought it was important that we actually try to improve drainage for the area, for the local area, with the knowledge that all of that drainage anyway, none of it goes towards the bridge at the Millburn Deli or that area where the worst of the flooding occurred. All that water, first of all, it's significantly reduced for all storms. And then what overflow does leave the property does continue to the west and then down Spring Street for a considerable distance where the pipes get larger and larger and can accommodate that. So there is a state-of-the-art stormwater management plan shown on sheet 4. There are also other construction details I would point out. We also do show, and it's hard to see, but we do show a connection of a proposed electric connection from the utility pole that comes underground and comes up underneath the new sidewalk and attaches into the meter niche on the west side of the building. So we certainly, we intend on meeting the township requirements. Sometimes we get utility companies that balk about putting the meters so far back, they want them further up, but we find if we're insistent and we tell them that the town will only accept it there, they finally acquiesce. Unfortunately, we still have poles, so we have to work off the pole. Hopefully someday, and the vision plan talks about it, we may be able to get rid of those utility poles and replace them with trees, but for now, given the cost, we are at least meeting the ordinance requirement of providing underground service into the building. All the utilities are provided through underground service into the building, primarily on the right and rear of the building. There are existing bike racks that were part of the Complete Streets project right in front of the building. They're shown near the carve out for the tree. We actually did look at, there's really not enough area to put any additional bike racks that wouldn't interfere with the concrete curb or parallel parkers opening their doors. So we did not propose any additional bike racks. We were happy that there are already two provided. And we wanted to keep that niche between the two retail entrances available for landscaping and planters because we thought it would be a much more attractive use. We did provide obviously 10 bike racks slots for the building users in the back, and there are 2 bike racks in the front already. If I then go back to our lead sheet, and I knew I would do this, so if I started answering questions, I would leave my notes completely behind, which is what I've done. So if I go back to the lead sheet, which is our sheet number 1, which I think we said was A13, is that correct?
That's correct.
Yes.
A13, I just want to focus in on the site data box for a second. So if we look at the site data box, you'll see on the right side, the lot area is 10,640. There is no there's no minimum size lot within the zone. There's no minimum lot width. There's no minimum lot depth. So we're all clearly conforming. We are conforming with the front yard setback. There is 0 required because in downtown buildings, you want those downtown sites, you want the buildings to reinforce the street line with pedestrian friendly buildings. So we are basically half a feet off the street. The side 0 is required. We are at existing is 2.09. We are at 4 feet on the right, and the on the left side where we've got the drive-through, the second and third floors are basically on the property line. To the rear, there is again no requirement because you're allowed 100% pavement. We're at 45 feet rear. The building height is 40 feet or 3 stories, and we are proposing 40 feet or 3 stories. Now, the reason that it can get confusing, and you may see a dimension on the architect's plan that shows a number from the first floor to the peak or to the top of the parapet of something higher than 40 feet, is because you work that off of the average grade. And because the average grade is higher on the right side of the building where we have the sidewalk, or the grades are higher on the sidewalk on the right side, it picks up that average grade so that you'll see a dimension on the architect's drawings that appears to be a little taller. Now, as it turns out, when I saw that, I was going to call Mr. Petto and reintroduce myself because I haven't seen him with topology. I used to know him from Montclair. And so I was going to call him. I decided to check the height first and realized we actually did have a slight goof on the height in that, as you recall, I told you we started with a full-size building that covered the entire property with underground parking. When we got rid of that, we failed to recalculate the average grade plane. So with the old building going to the back property line, we weren't cutting that back line, so I had actually a higher average grade plane. When I looked at the average grade plane just 2 days ago, I realized we were off by 5 inches. So we did alert the architect that they would, their distance from the finished floor to the highest part of the parapet would have to come down 5 inches. So it'll be 40 foot and 3 inches above the first floor. But as Nancy said, it's always been our intent to decide what the site wants first, get proper grading plan, and then from there calculate the average grade and set the building at 40 feet. And so we will do that. So we'll still comply with that. But I just wanted to, if anyone looked at the numbers and started to ask why there were so many grade points, I wanted to be clear that we did have to make a minor adjustment so that Nancy's drawings where they say Nancy Dougherty's Studio 1200s drawings say that they will, I'll be 40 foot 8 inches. They're going to reduce to 40 foot 3 inches. I would point out that many of the buildings we've done, whether it was 2 stories or 3 stories in the downtown, we've often needed height variances because it's often very difficult when you don't exclude parapets from the calculation to get appropriate heights in your retail and appropriate heights in your upper floors. That 40 feet is very difficult to work with to the top of the parapet, but we can make that work and we will. With regard to building coverage, again, 100% is permitted. We are adding 1,366 square feet of building. I'm sorry, we're at for building coverage. 100% is permitted. We're at 5,500 square feet. That's represents an increase of 1,366 square feet of what exists today. And in terms of lot coverage, we are increasing the lot coverage from 70.6% up to 96.8%. And that represents an increase of 2,794 square feet, which we're fully detaining through our detention system.
Mr. Keller, excuse me, just to, and I hate to interrupt you, but just to clarify the record here, you keep talking about existing. There is nothing existing there. So I appreciate what you're saying and I appreciate what you're trying to do, and that's fine. But the record's going to be very confusing because you continually refer to existing because you're trying to compare the intensity of this development with the previous construction, but the reality is there's nothing there now. So you're starting today before this board with a clean slate. And
Correct.
I would appreciate if, and I'll defer to the chair certainly and to the board, but I would appreciate the fact that you stop referring to what was there before and comparing it to a non-existent facility. You now have a vacant canvas, and that's what we're working from. Thank you. I'll pass it to the board if chair, if you disagree with that, please.
No, that's fine. Thank you. I appreciate the clarification, and I had noticed it as well. So thank you. And Rich, I hope you can appreciate where we're coming from on that.
I do. Obviously, we submitted when we submitted. I believe initially submitted the buildings were up, and that's why. And we did our survey, and so that's why I keep referring to what was there before. But you're correct. So I will not refer to the existing conditions moving forward. But in terms of the parking requirements, our mix of the 3,947 square foot of office space requires 16 spaces. Our retail generates another 13. That brings us up to 29. The 3 residential units generate a requirement of 6 spaces. That takes us up to 35 spaces. And the because we get an EV credit because we're proposing 6 spaces, we get to credit 3 spaces for parking, which takes our requirement down to 32. We are proposing 9 standard spaces, 1 handicap for a total of 10 spaces provided, and we've appropriately asked for variance relief. With regard to the wall graphics as proposed, everything now will comply, certainly in terms of coverage, with the exception of the location up above the first floor line, as indicated previously. So I think what might be best is if I go through the professional reports before I do the planning proofs, unless the board takes any exception to that.
No, that would be great. Thanks.
With regard to the town forester's report dated 12/9/2021, Jeff Pilot had no comment. And when I go through the topology report, I'll address a little bit more about tree removal on the site, but the forester had no comment. The fire department, I would point out their letter of 12/13/2021, other than wanting the usual Knox boxes and plans, etc. They basically took no exception to the building. So there was no, they had no issues regarding the ability to fight fire. They didn't cite any need to get a fire apparatus down the driveway. Certainly this was their opportunity, and Battalion Chief Thomas Pisano has certainly commented on things like that in the past. So I thought it was insightful that sort of backs up our notion that no fire department would ever pull a piece of apparatus into that driveway with even for a car fire, they would bring hoses down the driveway. The police department, their memo dated December 22nd. They basically took no exception, except they wanted signage indicating who would be able to use the parking lot. And I believe they also mentioned that they felt it would be required to buy parking permits for any retail business establishments for its employees, which we intend to do. With regard to the memorandum prepared by the Township Engineer Martha Callahan dated January 3rd, the first page is informational, observations and comments. Ms. Callahan does remark that that our calculations demonstrate reductions for the 210 and 100-year storms, which meets the requirements of the NJDEP and conforms with their state, their best management practices. She did point out on the second page that the existing trench drain is clogged at this point, and it needs to be cleaned, which we will. All informational, starting with the technical review and comment and recommendations. We will provide a soil testing. The rate of infiltration used at a ½ an inch per hour is very, very low. It's very, very conservative. We've had much higher numbers at the Beehive property across the street, the old Wells Fargo. We've had much higher numbers for the swim club behind us. So we expect that actually our infiltration rates will be better than the conservative number we use, but we will certainly provide those. And then as was indicated, the project is on sheet 4, comment 2.12 to 2.1b. Ms. Callahan does correctly state that while we didn't need to meet the state standards, we actually did. We will clean the debris from the trench drains. We will talk about the maximum uniformity when I go through with the lighting, when I go through the lighting comments from the planner. I think it'd be easier to put them together. We are showing an electrical feed to the building. We do recognize we need soil erosion and sediment control approval from the SCD. And our plans do actually show dust control measures. We are going to put a height clearance bar similar to what you see when you go into the mall. It's a simple bar on chains. That'll be set at 12.5 feet. So just hanging 6 inches below to give us a little bit of leeway. There'll be a bar that hangs down to make sure that no vehicles over 12.6 go into the parking lot. There will be a fire department connection located on the front westerly side of the building. And that's for fire department hookup, and that's where they would hook up their equipment and they would fight the fire from the street. And we do agree to put a no left turn painted arrow on the pavement if the application is approved. And we of course would repair any sections of sidewalk that were damaged. And we recognize we will have to file deeds and pay a sanitary sewer connection fee. So we can comply with all of the specific requests outlined in Ms. Callahan's report. With regard to the plan.
Can I just, you just said we can comply. Can I get a will comply?
We will.
Thank
Yes.
you. Okay.
My client has agreed that they will.
Thanks. Sorry to ruin your flow. Okay, go ahead.
And I apologize, when I mentioned I went off the reservation and got away from my notes before. I did want to mention, Tony did say, Mr. Susilla did say that we had submitted an environmental impact statement and that that was authored by my office here. And I just want to quickly state, we did provide that. I know Mr. Pietro Jorge has repeatedly asked for those in the past. Don't like giving waiver on those. So we did go through that exercise. There are no wetlands on the site. There are no steep slopes. There's not in a flood hazard area. The property does not contribute to the drainage problems at the west branch of the Railway River up the street near the deli. And you are still providing reductions regardless. There's always some impact. Any possible environmental impacts associated with proposed development will be limited in duration and intensity. Those were our findings. The use of standard construction techniques as is required and enforced by the municipality and the Soil Conservation District. does ensure that there are no adverse impacts, environmental impacts resulting from the proposed development. And as I indicated, the proposed stormwater detention and infiltration system will reduce existing runoff, and the electric charging stations do represent a net benefit to the environment. We believe that the project can be built without adversely affecting the local environment, public health, safety, or welfare. But we rescinded that waiver request. We did provide it, as is typical with a site that was fully developed and currently contains no buildings. There really is very limited environmental impact associated with a building such as this in that particular location. And at any point, I'm happy to answer any questions about that. So if there are no questions on that, I would go into the topology report. And the first few pages are essentially a recap of the project, the location, the circulation, the project proposal, the site improvements, all consistent with my testimony so far. The only thing is there's no dry well on the site. We're actually providing perforated pipes, linear perforated pipes. With regard to the use discussion, there's really nothing new to offer other than we will comply with the 40-foot height requirement. That's based upon the height of the highest part of the building structure, excluding any exempted elements to the average grade plane. We will comply. On page 5, Mr. Petto just reiterates the parking variance needed. He indicates that we need a variance for providing no loading space. Our take on it was that we were providing a loading space, but it required waivers for the length and height of the loading space. You can really look at it either way, but we think it's appropriate for this site, and we'll get into that in a minute. The wall graphic height standards under sign standards on section C, on page 5, excuse me, we've eliminated the variance for the 5'2" signage, and we do still need the variance for having the building name above the second floor line. With regard to the, if we get into the bulk, the bulk variance discussion, and I'll try not to talk so fast, so I do want to kind of touch base on each of these. Parking standards, excuse me. Here we go, the variance discussion. With regard to one question was asked that we needed to confirm that there are no less than 0.8 spaces are provided per employee or contractor, because you have two standards for parking in retail. One is based upon square footage. One is based upon number of employees or independent contractors. We don't know the number of employees that'll be on the site based upon the 3,497 square feet of retail, of office space at one, that's for office. For office space at 1 per 250, that's 16 spaces. If you were to apply the alternate metric of 0.8, you'd have to have 21 employees to exceed that. We can't see, certainly in this age of office staffing, we can't see that there'd be 21 employees on the using the second floor offices to trigger that. It's somewhat of a moot point because we've requested a variance from the parking ordinance anyways. But I think that the 0.8 spaces will not impact the parking, and it is somewhat moot. Regardless, we're seeking a parking variance with an abundance of available permit parking. With regard to the minimum loading space, one of Mr. Petto's comments was that he felt that the using the egress lane created a dangerous circulation and loading condition. And we actually don't think it is that. We think it's consistent with other areas in the downtown. Is it perfect? No. But we thought the benefits outweigh the detriments of providing some form of off-street loading and unloading onto the site. Given the allocation of the parking spaces at 1 per each of the 3 apartments, the 6 for the office, there are no retail customers or employees using the parking lot. The only people parking here will be familiar with the situation. It's not a public lot, it's a private lot. There'll be minimal use of the driveway for the 9 to 10 tenant spaces that may be occupied. And during those limited times, in the unlikely event that another vehicle will be using the driveway while a truck is in the driveway will act as a single direction driveway, as many other driveways on non-corner commercial properties in the B4 district do. Short-term loading on the egress side of the is on the egress side, so the vehicles entering the site will not be impeded. Loading space will primarily be used for tenant move-in, which will be rare for 3 apartments and 3 office tenants. And based upon the size of those apartments and offices, moving vans will be able to occupy the loading space well off the street so that they don't interfere with people pulling in. My office here, I have 19 spaces. I have a single width 2-way driveway. The standard rule has, and I'm on Main Street where people come over the bridge at 40, 50 miles an hour into the intersection. The standing rule of my employees that if someone's pulling in while you're pulling out, you stop, you back up, you let them pass, and then you proceed. A standard moving van actually could fit in there. A car could come past that and actually get into the egress aisle, and then not have any conflicting movements with a vehicle moving in. So is it ideal? No, but given the limited amount of times the loading space will be used and the minimum amount of intensity of movements from the parking lot, since it's designated to both office and office employees as well as residents only, we don't think that there's going to be a significant conflict. And certainly the geometry means that it will not be a dangerous situation. There's good site visibility. We meet the site triangle requirements, and the fact that we've got the building setback 8 feet, it actually provides for better view of the sidewalk for cars entering or leaving. Garbage trucks will back into the driveway. They won't use the loading area. They will load the refuse and be gone within a few minutes. I don't know how anybody gets UPS, FedEx, or Amazon drivers to actually use a loading spot. They generally make 3-4 deliveries from one spot, and they're generally going to park in the available street parking, which again, in this shoulder area in the downtown, there is often street parking curbside. If not, they're going to park where they park. The applicant team certainly felt it was better to provide some off-street loading ability rather than none, which is more common throughout the downtown. And again, as I indicated before, unlike the Beehive property, this is not a large lot. This is not a large lot where we have a couple acres to deal with. We're a small lot, and to put a 65-foot deep loading zone into a 100-foot deep property really is not feasible. And I don't want to say it's a C1 variance. It's not a hardship created by the size of the lot, but it's really atypical to this kind of downtown development. And if our alternatives were providing no loading versus providing loading, we thought this was the better alternative. And this is not a site. This is not a site that's ever going to be aggregated into another lot and developed as a bigger one. So we think it's not unsafe. We think it's a perfect no, but we think it is safe. We think that it will function well for this unique mix of users and this building configuration. With regard to the wall height graphic, that went away, but we still do need the mounted height. The 35 square foot sign indicating the building name over the driveway opening, it can't be placed any lower given the structure. And the signage actually we think is going to be key for residential and office users coming to the site, because we don't want to compete with the signage for the retail tenants. And so you can say, look, I'm going to be coming to whether it's the 380 building or it's the whatever building, it'll be identified. My office is in the 380 building on Millburn Avenue. My offices are on the 2nd floor, or I live at 380, as differentiated, so people won't be going into the 2 retail spaces to find out how to find the office space, etc. We think it's appropriately scaled. We think it is well under the maximum area, and because it's set back 6 feet from the main facade, we think its location above the first floor line, any impact is certainly diminished. I'll talk about that in the negative criteria later. We did confirm height, which was one of Mr. Peto's comments. On page 6 into 7, there are the access parking standards for the accessible parking standards for a handicap in our town has strangely always been 12 foot wide by 20 feet long. We are providing one that is actually 18 feet wide by 19 feet long. We're providing 19 feet because that is consistent with the stall size requirements for non-handicap spaces of 9 by 19. So not wanting to jog that curb, I don't think I've ever done a 20-foot deep handicap spot in 35 years in working in the township of Millburn. We've always done 18 or 19 or 17 or 18 with a 2-foot overhang, but we've never done one that's 19 feet. It exceeds state requirements, ADA requirements, it exceeds RSAS requirements, and it's certainly a 19-foot deep stall exceeds the requirements in probably 75% of the communities we work in. It does not present a navigation problem or a safety issue. The loading space dimensions, this is where we thought we needed waivers for these. 10 foot wide by 60 feet is required by 15 feet tall. 11 foot wide by 45 by 12.5 is what we're proposing. We feel that the 45 is more than adequate to get an SU-30 or a standard moving truck in, not a tractor trailer, but a standard moving truck has 30 feet of cargo, 30 with the overhang, it's got 36 feet of total space. So 36-foot truck could clearly fit and be biased to the back of that 45-foot area. We're actually providing an extra foot of width in that aisle, and we are keeping it at 12.5 feet tall, which again is consistent with an SU-30 vehicle and does allow other vehicles into that area. So we think it's a waiver that there's really no harm in the board approving. The utility connection, we indicated we are providing connection to the from underground. I'll wait on tree replacement until I get to one of the later comments, and I'll go through all the trees. We do need a waiver for the foot candles in that the one between a half a foot and 1 foot candle is permitted under the ordinance as an average. Our average is actually at 1.6, so our average is a little higher, and that's partially because we have some slightly more intense, not super intense lighting under the canopy, which raised our average up. I will say we fought very hard to make sure that what we think the most important metric is uniformity, both in terms of average to minimum, minimum to maximum. Those standards are well under those required, and the town standards are among the most rigorous we know of. And uniformity is a metric that makes sure that lighting is even. It's not good to have, when you have bright spots that go to dark spots, your eyes have trouble adjusting. It's better when you have an even grade of light, whether it's slightly under, slightly over. If it's even, it's much more pleasant and easy to navigate. And so we are conformance with the certainly well under the maximum. 10-foot candles is permitted. We're at 3.2. Our uniformity rates are also well in consistency in conformance with the town's rigorous standards. And I think that later on, Mr. Petto recommended that would not be an issue in his mind if the board would approve that waiver. With regard to the tree replacement, I knew my notes were up here someplace. With regard to the tree replacement, as part of the demolition plan, the site was actually reviewed by the township forester, Jeff Pilot. All the trees on the site were exempted from the replacement requirement of the ordinance based upon size, location, or condition of trees. So actually, this is one where I get to turn the tables and say, well, the site's actually empty, that we don't have any trees, but it's actually true. All of those trees were exempted either due to their condition, their species, or their location on the site. So that if there had been a tree replacement requirement, Mr. Pilot would have required it when we did the demo and would have saved an IOU for future trees. We are exempted from that. We are happy to look at putting an additional street tree in the front and in coordination with the town or the forester's office. We're happy to do that. But as part of the demolition permit, that was all handled already. On to page 7 and Mr. Peto's planning comments. One of the items was to, item A2 was to provide testimony regarding how the proposed project advances the goals and recommendations of the downtown vision plan. And I'm actually going to do that when I go through my planning proofs. With regard to parking circulation and loading comments, Mr. Peto again pointed out that he has major concerns regarding loading, emergency and related operations on the site, in that we propose to use the driveway egress lane as a loading space, creates limited sight lines and dangerous circulations and loading conditions. We actually don't think it creates an issue with the sight lines because of the nature of the trucks that will be in there. Generally very short-term use, as I said, given the anticipated size of any vehicle using the loading area and the very low usage of the tenant-only parking area. Sight lines are certainly adequate. We've shown them on the drawing. And while they do represent an occasional inconvenience, the proposed condition we don't feel is dangerous. We actually ran it by our traffic consultant and he concurred, our parking consultant. If the board disagrees, we can certainly eliminate the loading spot. We felt that the benefits of the project outweighed any detriments even without a loading zone, but we thought it was better to provide one. As indicated, there were some questions about circulation, which I indicated that the garbage truck will back in. Mr. Peto also referenced that there could be an issue with plowed snow. There is an area, let me bring up my site plan. I'm going to frustrate, I don't remember which. One of the comments was that there was insufficient area for plowed snow. And there is an area on the east side that can accommodate snow. We actually didn't landscape this because we want this, there's a grade change from our property into the adjoining property, and we didn't want to put a retaining wall along the property line. And then we'd have to add a guide rail, et cetera. So we handled that mitigation. We matched that by doing a decorative stone, river stone, connection in there that does allow for some groundwater recharge of what hits it, but we didn't want to slide the parking to the left, but that area does allow for some storage of snow. We are intending to take the 2 9-foot areas for the handicap spot, which is 9 and 9 is 18. That only needs to be 16, so we're going to shrink that to 16, which means our end space will go from 10 feet up to 12 feet, which means that again, for small snow, we can push towards that side. There'd still be adequate room for the car to back out, increased area for the back out. The reality is in large snowstorms, the owner is going to have to pay for snow removal. We like to plow when we can, and most of our snow events are relatively minor and can be handled by plowing. But if we have to, that snow would just have to be removed. As indicated, we have adequate room for ambulances. Fire trucks would not pull in the driveway. The fire department water connection will be at the street. Comment number 2 in that section was the recommendation that we relocate the bollards at the rear elevation so the rear doors can fully open without extending beyond the bollards. The proposed condition allows a vehicle to block doors from opening, posing concerns for daily operations. The architect had indicated the 2 egress doors that come out of the building, they were going to recess those doors. So if they recess the doors, those doors move back in a foot, which means they open up and they will not interfere with the 23 feet back up. They're protected by the bollards and there's no interference with people leaving the site, or those doors can't open to let people out. The reality also is that for people coming down the stairs, if they use the easterly stairs, there's a second means of egress out into the sidewalk. And if you come down the back, you're all the way at the back end. So with the recessing of the doors in those 2 locations, we don't think that becomes an issue at all. The bike room, the refuse area, the mechanical room, we think that those doors will be shut 99.5% of the time. So there's really no conflict. They open a few inches past the bollards into that 23 feet space, but I think there's no harm, and we want to keep those so that they can open fully. Was a recommendation that the lift gate be connected to the building's fire alarm system, so the gates automatically raise during a fire emergency. We have no problem with that. The applicant should provide wheel stops to protect the vehicle's charging stations and the and the fence. Wheel stops can be a maintenance issue, especially with snow removal. So the spaces are 19 foot deep, which is 1 foot deeper than typical municipal RSI standards. The fence actually where it is will allow for 1 foot of overhang. So we would probably like to not put wheel stops across the spaces where we don't have the charging stations. The charging stations are, depending upon the manufacturer, they are generally mounted on a bollard that can take a small impact. They're located at the stripe, so theoretically, unless a car is parking over the line, they wouldn't interact that. But we will consider, we'll be happy to consider putting wheel stops across those areas if we think it's necessary, because we certainly don't want those charging stations to be damaged.
Mr. Keller, again, I'm going to follow up on what the chair said. When you said you will consider it, are you? That's not a commitment to do it. You don't want to have the requirement to put it in. Is that your client's position?
I prefer to not have that requirement. Yes.
Okay.
We'll certainly consider protection of those items, but I generally find that wheel stops become more of a maintenance issue and they inhibit snow plowing. So if the board felt strongly, we'd be happy to put wheel stops in, but we'd prefer to have that be an option for the owner based upon the manufacturer and model of the EV stations to be selected.
Thank you.
Thank you. There was a recommendation that the applicant provide the maximum number of parking spaces for typical maximum occupancy to lessen the burden of offsite congestion on municipal parking facilities. If the appropriate number of spaces can't be provided at site, we should address how this impacts the site suitability. In terms of site suitability, the combined uses are certainly consistent with the master plan. In terms of the master plan, the zoning ordinance, and the downtown vision plan. Meeting 100% of the parking demand on site is appropriate for large scale redevelopment on larger lots. It's really not possible on infill lots. It is also actually contrary to the downtown vision plan. I think that what we've tried to do is strike the most amount of spaces we can with a building that reinforces the street line in a pedestrian friendly manner. And I think that by providing 10 spaces where many of the other users, other existing sites have zero parking. If you remember back to the 1991 master plan, actually stated that on-site parking should be discouraged in the favor of using regional, well-placed public parking facilities. That master plan, I mean, we've had a lot of re-examinations of it, but that still becomes part of that record. So, you know, part of the way the downtown has been developed, I think we're certainly providing a balance. We're not providing none. We're providing 10 parking. And what's most important is Mr. Maltz has indicated that in this shoulder area west of the downtown core, there's adequate parking to handle the retail visitors and employees, as well as the office and residential users. There was a question as to whether the site was subject to any pre-existing requirements for off-street parking or purchase of municipal parking permits. The pet store was there for years. I did check with the parking department, and the only recent permits that were ever pulled were employee permits for 380 Work Home, which occupied the former building on the westerly edge of the site. They pulled parking permits for 2 years, but they were not required. I would point out anybody who works or lives in the downtown is entitled to get a parking permit, so that if the landlord indicates that the second floor tenant, for instance, in the office gets 2 dedicated spaces, and that for any additional employees they must get a parking permit, they can simply go down, show proof of employment, and get a permit to park in those lots. It doesn't necessarily, it's hard to tell how many spaces will be required, because certainly these are not huge offices. We don't expect you're going to get 20 employees in them. We expect, especially these days, you're going to get 2-3 employees. One of the nice things we liked about this arrangement, and I think that it was attractive to the owner developer, was there's some hope that some of these apartments will actually rent office space on the second floor, turning it into a homework environment where they've got an apartment on the second floor and they've got a workspace on the floor below where they can also entertain clients if they need to, but it's just getting out of the house, getting out of the pajamas and getting to another space. So I think that we have no idea whether any were required, but I think it's somewhat immaterial. Certainly none were required, we think, by code. We do recognize that it is a county route. I think the architect answered all of the architectural questions. Landscaping and grading comments. Testimony regarding existing landscape, tree site, and environmental conditions. Again, I'm not sure how to answer that because we're starting from an empty site, but we did provide an EIS, and a tree removal permit was taken out and approved by the department with no replacements required. With regard to the existing and proposed grading, we did address all that already exhaustively. Again, not a major project, but we went to the higher standards anyways. There was a recommendation that they replace parts of the hardscaping with landscaping. I actually think that Mr. Peto's comment about providing some screening that would be integral to the architecture up to a point, maybe for the back two, not the last one, but for the back two, not the first column span, but the next two column spans, is actually an intriguing idea. We, in a 0 lot line requirement area, we don't have enough room for bushes. As was indicated, the neighbor on the significantly larger site to our east, the Schoolhouse Plaza, they do have mature landscaping that shields that. It was removed from the perspective so that you could see what the building looked like. We don't control that, but we see no reason that that's going to change. I've known the property owner on there since I started surveying in the early 70s. And we worked on that project when I was a kid, and I see no reason that they would remove that landscaping, but I think it certainly would be nice to supplement it. I really don't want to remove the stone area because it's a stabilized area that allows us to make that grade transition without retaining walls and without guide rails, but we will compress the lot slightly to allow for the snow issues, and the later comment about wanting to provide more area, wanting to slide the entire parking lot to the left to make more room for the last space. We're going to be 10 feet going up to 12 feet anyway, so I think it's a moot point. We do agree we'll need soil erosion sediment control plan. We appreciate the recommendation that the board accept the waiver on the average foot candles. Testimony, I think we provided, there is no spillover onto neighboring properties to the right and rear. There might be a slight amount of spillover if I go to the lighting sheet, which I'm off my page. So Tony, you'll have to remind me what exhibit this is again.
17.
17. Because we have some slightly higher numbers underneath the canopy and these downlights in that area, and again, they're relatively low intensity, but we do get probably a little spillover onto the adjoining property right where those bushes are. But again, it's certainly not lights that's visible. There's no bare exposed filament. It's in a slight area, but for the back of the property and all sides, there's absolutely no spillover of light onto the adjoining properties. There is, we don't think there's any, we can certainly accommodate hold on, I skipped one. The building mounted lighting. The building mounted lighting on the front, we did not count any of that in our foot candles or any of the building mounted lighting. They generally wash the walls, provide a little glow against the walls. They have negligible impact on the foot candles that are generated by our primary lighting system. So we did not include any of the building mounted access lighting in our site analysis, nor do we normally. It was actually a good idea. We had moved the lights in the back a number of places. I think we missed when that 2-foot canopy came out. So we really were going to lower them to be on the canopy, but we ran the numbers and we can actually still get a compliant lighting plan if we take those B lights and we lower them to be under the canopy, so they would be at 12 feet. So we can certainly comply with that. There's really no need to provide house side cutoff shields because we have no lighting against the adjoining properties. the lighting is on the building so that house light cutoff shields, these are state-of-the-art LED directional light fixtures with a throw that is largely out. So there's really no need for house side cutoff shields on these lights. As was indicated, the parking lots in the rear can be dimmed after a time. I think Nancy said 11 p.m. And they can go down to 10% lighting, and they can when there's activation in the parking lot, they can either come up to 25 or 50%. And if there's continued activity on the motion sensors, they can come up to full brightness for security. The building accented lights on the front would be on from dusk to dawn.
So Rich, good evening. You're Energizer bunnying, and I love it. But talking about 11 p.m. and dusk to dawn is bringing us, and I really hate to do this because I know you're on a roll and you're going. You may know from your colleague that I tend to try to wrap us up after 3 hours. I think everybody's brains are not as best focused. And I want to offer us, do you justice by offering the applicant the opportunity for sort of our full attention. And I want to make sure all of our questions can then be answered of you. So I don't think there's a way we can wrap this up sort of in the next 15 minutes by doing the application justice. So I think we may want to postpone and carry this application from tonight. I know I'm cutting you off, so if there was like a point you were about to make, I can allow you to certainly finish your train of thought. And then if that's okay with you, then I'd like to ask Mr. Cersillo if we can look at making sure your witnesses as needed might be available at our next meeting date.
You cut me off at the perfect time because it was my last comment on Mr. Peto's report. And then I was going to try to quickly do the planning testimony, but you're right, it would not give you guys much time to debate.
And I know we have members of the public who, I don't want to have to cut them off either. And I don't want us all to have to sit here until 11:30 because I won't make it myself. So thank you for getting through the planner's comments and addressing many of them. I know that will help us in minimizing our questions going forward. But Eileen, I just want to confirm that I did hear you mention that on the 19th, as of now, we had no completed applications for that meeting.
The reason you have nothing on that evening is because I couldn't be there that night. So my application that was on for the 19th got bumped because I'm in Summit that night, and it's a prior commitment.
Understood. Okay. And then we don't have the first meeting in February. So I really hate to have to push you into late February because I know we're close, but I know we're not quite close enough. So what is the second meeting date in February? Eileen, do you have that?
The second meeting date in February is
16th, February 16th.
February 16th, and I do have Beehive Properties. I just scheduled that for that date.
Okay, but I don't think this is going to take a whole lot longer. I think this is, I think we need another hour to do this application justice or so. If I guess I can't be for sure, but it's going to be longer than the 15-20 minutes kind of that we have now. February 16th, Mr. Cersillo, is that amenable for you, Mr. Keller?
It's amenable for me.
Yeah, I believe it is. I'm just loading up my calendar here.
Okay, I don't know if you want to check with the applicant if that date works too.
Yeah, the 16th is I'm available. So we would.
My client's available as well.
So we would be before the Beehive Properties then?
That's how I would prefer to do it. Yeah, to give you the next sort of bite at the apple, as it were. Yeah.
My partner will be mad at me, but I'm okay with that.
That's the way the cookie crumbles. Okay.
What about the architect and Mr. Maltz? Are they excused?
We have Ed, I believe they would be because we have opened to the public questions for them, and we have asked all our board's questions for them. Is that correct?
Well, that's correct, but if they are available, they probably ought to be there because while when the board deliberates or the board starts asking questions, there may be other issues that come up. So it'd be nice to have the witnesses available. I don't think the application should not go forward if they are not available, but I would ask that the applicant make them available if they are available.
Okay, understood. Mr. Maltz, you're muted, but I think you're trying to talk.
Yeah, if necessary, I'm available on the 16th.
Thank you.
As am I.
Thank you.
Okay, so will I make a motion to move it, or I just make the announcement to move it?
I think you just make the announcement that the matter will be carried to February 16, 2022. There'll be no further notice. It will be through the virtual methodology with the new link. And it'll be at 7:30 p.m. on February 16th, 2022.
Thank you, Ed. What Ed said is what I intended. Thank you. All right, I appreciate everybody for being here tonight. I make a motion to adjourn. Anybody want a second?
Second.
Thank you. All right, Happy New Year, good evening. We'll see you all. We'll see the board probably later this month, and we'll see this application next month. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Have a nice
New
evening.
Year.
Have a good evening. Thank you.